I'm Dave Miller. Coming up on the next Think Out Loud, we'll talk with the journalist Katie Engelhardt. Her new book is called The Inevitable: Dispatches on the Right to Die. It's based on years of reporting on people who are using laws like Oregon's pioneering Death with Dignity Act, and on people who say those laws don't go far enough.
Stay with OPB for that conversation today at noon. Support for OPB comes from Larkins Vacura Kaiser, believing that litigation is an art representing local, regional, and national clients in state and federal courts in Oregon and Washington. lvklaw.com. You're with OPB in Portland and in McMinnville at 91.5 FM in Halsey and in Monmouth at 550 AM and at opb.org.
I'm Melissa Harris-Perry, in for Tanzina Vega.
Portland will be closed and our city employees will enjoy what I believe is a much needed break. Because of that, I want to take the opportunity today to acknowledge and honor the fallen members of our military for whom Memorial Day was created by reading an official proclamation announcing May 31st, 2021 to be Memorial Day in the city of Portland. I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation first. Whereas Memorial Day was established by federal law in 1971. And whereas for 70 years, Memorial Day has honored members of the United States Armed Forces who died in service to our country. And whereas these deaths total over 1.3 million Americans spanning across 11 major wars. And whereas these soldiers recognized and accepted the hardships of military service, taking an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And whereas we should strive to commemorate their sacrifices and celebrate their lives, remembering their courage and their commitment to service. And whereas we need to recognize and respect the soldiers who are willing to serve on our behalf and who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And whereas, while most of us enjoy this upcoming long weekend, we should also take the time to reflect on the sacrifices of soldiers, Marines, airmen, and sailors who made this possible. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 31st, 2021 to be Memorial Day in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day. To accept this proclamation, colleagues, we're joined by Bethany Wamsley from the Returning Vets Project. Good morning and welcome, Bethany. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak for just a few moments. I appreciate so much the proclamation. Good morning. As you know, my name is Bethany Wamsley, and I'm the Executive Director for the Returning Veterans Project. Our nonprofit was founded right here in Portland, actually, in 2005. And each year we connect hundreds of post 9/11 veterans, service members, and their families throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington to free, confidential mental health counseling and physical health services like acupuncture, chiropractic care, and more. Our network of nearly 200 volunteer healthcare professionals give back to the veteran and families in our community by donating their time and their expertise. And in turn, our volunteers make healthcare more equitable and accessible to our military communities. Our organization is committed to improving access to the health services they need so they can reintegrate, recover, and withstand the unique challenges of military and veteran life. Today, their needs are rising and you can help. Please visit our website, returningveterans.org, to learn more about our amazing volunteers, the opportunity that we have to recruit more volunteers, and of course, donations are welcome. By giving back to those that have served our country, we give our local veterans and families hope for healing and the future. May, as you know, is Military Appreciation Month, and Monday is Memorial Day. It's important to honor and grieve for those that have given the ultimate sacrifice and service to our nation. It should be more than just laying flowers and placing flags. We should all take a moment this weekend to remember what this holiday is all about and honor those who served our nation and are no longer with us. Perhaps you know a veteran or someone who is still serving in the military. Memorial Day is the perfect opportunity to personally thank a veteran, a service member, or their family member. Through that personal connection, we honor veterans that are very aware and very thankful that they made it home when they most likely know and feel the loss of one, if not many, service members who did not. And after you thank them, please take a moment to ask and listen and understand what they did in service to our country. Enjoy your weekend. Happy Memorial Day.
Thank you so much, Bethany. We appreciate your being here this morning, and thanks for the great work that you do and your organization does. And we're glad that you had this opportunity to hopefully share the good works of the organization with many others in the community as well. So thank you to the Returning Vets Project for all you do for so many people. Colleagues, I don't know if anybody has anything they'd like to add, but you certainly have the opportunity if you'd so choose.
Mr. Mayor, if
Commissioner Maps, thank you. And Keelan, could you, the commissioners on the list are all over the place. Can you please cluster them the way you usually do numerically? It'll help me see whose hand is raised. Commissioner Maps.
I just want to thank you and my colleagues for recognizing Memorial Day. I don't have a big speech planned, but I do want to, I'm inspired by Bethany's comments. So I'd like to take this moment to recognize and thank my fellow Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, who is a Navy vet. I appreciate her service to our country and our city. And happy Memorial Day, everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner Maps. And Commissioner Ryan, good morning.
Sure, good morning, Mayor. First of all, thank you, Bethany, for being here this morning. It was so wonderful to hear your words and the 200 volunteers of returning veterans. Sounds like you have a great organization, and I'm looking forward to getting to know it better. I just wanted to say a few things. The family members that I've lost, my father was an Air Force veteran. My mom made it possible for him to serve. And then 3 of my brothers who've deceased, 2 were in the Navy and 1 was in the Air Force. And they served their country, but they also, their mental health definitely was triggered, if you will, and took off during when they came home. And I think we know much more about this today than we did back when I think there were really just no dialogue about it and limited services. So it is also, as we know, Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm just kind of knitting those two together in a way that I hope you find respectful. And I just know that as I think about those PTSD wounds that so many people have, and obviously being focused on the houselessness crisis, there's a connection there as well. So I know that we can keep partnering with organizations like Returning Veterans, and I also just hope that all Portlanders take time to reflect this weekend and take time to get unplugged from the noise and reach out and connect with somebody. I think we're coming out of some major isolation because of this pandemic. And I think this is a really big opportunity this weekend to heal. And so I really appreciate that we took a moment this morning with this proclamation. And yes, Commissioner Hardesty, I really respect that you were a member of the U.S. Naval Services, and it's a part of your rich legacy and rich lived experience. So it's an honor to serve with a veteran as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Mayor, for bringing this forward, and also thank you, Bethany, for your comments. And also, I too want to acknowledge my colleague, Commissioner Hardesty, for her service today as well. This day the Memorial Day gives us an opportunity to reflect on our values as a nation and those whose lives are sacrificed sacrifice to uphold our right to pursue these values and to pursue justice and our futures. And after the last several years, when these ideals were under attack, we appreciate this more than ever. And because of this, we're able to exercise our rights to advocate, to push for the building of a better country. And we want to thank and honor our military communities and veterans for not only serving, but really having served all of us in the community. So we may continue to pursue these things and make our communities better. So thank you again for your sacrifices, your family's sacrifices. And we remember these individuals and families this week.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of feel like I have to speak up now since I've been outed by all my colleagues. Let me just say that I am honored that I had the privilege as a youngster to serve in the United States Navy. I had the privilege of being one of the first women on board ship. But not just me, myself, but I actually want to acknowledge just how badly we've treated vets after they've served, after they've done what we've asked them to do, without question. I've had the privilege for a few years to participate in the Veteran Stand Down that Transition Project does every year. And it breaks my heart every single time I participate, because what I know is these are people that gave everything they had when asked. And most of the time we're asking babies to go and represent us all over the globe. And so I have a high degree of respect for all the veterans of all the conflicts that the U.S. have been involved in. And I challenge all of us to do better, to say thank you to a veteran, to make sure that you're looking people in the eye and acknowledging the sacrifices that they made. I heard Commissioner Ryan talk about PTSD, and we didn't even know what the word was decades ago, but we do know that no one can serve during wartime and not be impacted. So thank you, Bethany, the two Bethanies that are on our screen. I don't think the gentleman with the headphones is really named Bethany, but thank you both. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for highlighting the fact that talk about hidden heroes all over our community that rarely get acknowledged. So thank you, and thank you, Mayor, for bringing the proclamation.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, and thank you for your service in so many ways. And I also want to acknowledge members of the city team. There are many, many people who are amongst our employees, including on our own staffs who've served in the military. Contran on my staff served proudly in the military, and there's quite a few other folks at City Hall who served, and this is a good time to acknowledge their efforts as well. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. And with that, that concludes our pre-gavel item. Colleagues, this is the convening of the Portland City Council meeting for Wednesday, May 26, 2021. Keelan, good morning. Please call the roll.
Good morning. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Max.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here, under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely and by teleconference. And the city's made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPBX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to the council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. Council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, flexibility, and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to conduct the city's business. And with that, we'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decoro. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the City Council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. Thank you.
Thank you. First up is communications. Keelan, item number 371, the first individual, please.
Request of Cassondra Bird to address council regarding St. John's Tank and Vernon Standpipe. It doesn't look like Cassandra has joined us yet. Should I go on to 372?
Yeah, why don't you go to the next person, item 372, please.
Request of Jennifer Pereau to address council regarding clean and safe from a small business perspective.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Pereau. I own 2 small food businesses in Northeast Portland. I organize with the Portland Independent Business Bloc and the Western Regional Advocacy Project. I'm here to discuss issues that myself and the small businesses in my network have discussed at great length. To provide context, it was myself and colleagues at the Business Bloc that circulated a petition titled "Small Business Owners Call on Mayor Wheeler to Defund the Police." We received 5,000 signatures in 1 week, after which we presented it to the mayor and were subsequently ignored. I bring up this petition to make the point that the opinions of business owners are not monolith. It's just that some business owners have more influence at City Hall than others. I've attended a few action tables, but it feels like they are taking place in a vacuum when you consider recent stories about Sam Adams meeting with lawyers in private, promising sweeps in exchange for endorsements, or when I read the Portland Business Alliance is so entitled and arrogant in their access, they don't bother filing the correct lobbying paperwork. So when I hear the mayor and his surrogates say business community, I assume they mean wealthy property owners, developers, and corporations who make up the Portland Business Alliance and who have very different priorities than small businesses like mine. So here's what myself and my community observe when it comes to public safety. We see 3 commissioners defunding Portland Street Response just a few weeks after a Portland citizen in crisis was executed by police in a public park. This was a horrific outcome that myself and many Portlanders believe could have been very different. This vote came after much impassioned testimony from the community asking you to expand this important program. We also see the mayor's office shrugging off concerns of various community groups, including experts on the topic regarding the clean and safe ESD contract. I want to thank Commissioner Rubio and Commissioner Hardesty for meeting with RAP and other coalition members about the contract. And to Commissioner Maps and Ryan, I'd ask that you respond to our request for a meeting so you can be included in this dialogue and respond to our concerns. For anyone listening that isn't familiar with the issue, I'd refer you to the City Auditor's report on enhanced service districts, clean and safe being the downtown example. The report is highly critical of ESDs due to the extreme lack of oversight and accountability. The report ultimately asks if ESDs should be engaged in public space services, finding, for instance, that the private patrolling of public space problematic. My cohort would go further, positing that ESDs are a waste of money because you can't solve the problem ESDs are trying to solve with a business improvement district. In any case, we believe all stakeholders, not just property owners, should have a voice in deciding if we want a private security force policing public space downtown. It's undemocratic and results in the targeted and sometimes violent harassment of BIPOC community and our houseless neighbors. You don't have to take my word for it. There's arrest data and testimony we are happy to provide. I'm grateful that just yesterday, the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing released their final recommendations. They also proposed fully funding Portland Street Response and the elimination entirely of the policing functions of ESDs. I strongly urge the council, you uphold your duty as electeds and listen to the people of Portland and not just the status quo power brokers at the PBA. Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you for your perspective. I obviously disagree with you on a couple of points, but Just to address a couple of the issues you indicated, I actually meet with many different groups and organizations and constituencies. Not all of those are public meetings. I freely acknowledge that. However, I assume anything that I say in any meeting with any constituent is fair game for people to relate to the press or to the public or anybody else they want. Just yesterday, I had one of my regular meetings with a number of different business coalition leaders, which include far more than just the Portland Business Alliance. It includes neighborhood business districts. It includes advocates for small business, as well as small business owners and operators from every corner of the city. So I want to assure you, I am hearing perspectives broadly when it comes to business owners and operators in the community. And I appreciate your acknowledging the work of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. As you'll recall, there were many people who opposed my efforts to create the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing for fear that it would be too beholden to me or too beholden to my office. They have demonstrated independence. They have demonstrated strength. They have provided, I think, a fantastic platform for people in the community to be able to share their thoughts around community safety and policing specifically. So there are many things you've said where there may be some confusion about what my actual role is or what my actual viewpoints are. There's a couple of things where we probably disagree, but I actually do appreciate your being here and sharing your perspective today. Thank you. Next individual, please, Keelan.
Item 373, request of Laura Feldman to address council regarding living within the fossil fuel infrastructure on the North Portland Peninsula.
Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Laura Feldman. I was born and raised in Portland and grew up in North Portland. I now live in the Portsmouth neighborhood on top of fossil fuel pipelines, which I think deliver jet fuel from the critical energy infrastructure hub in Northwest Portland to the airport. A couple of years ago, I attended an emergency preparedness workshop featuring the city's shelter-in-place concept. I asked the presenter, what if you live over petroleum pipelines? And she answered, contact your politician. So here I am, asking you about the risk of living on top of these fuel lines, which signs mark street corners from North Dwight all the way to North Chautauqua along Willis Boulevard, warning us not to dig, or in case of emergency, call Kinder Morgan. I have experienced my wall shuttering, causing a picture to fall off. My downstairs neighbor who shares this wall has also felt the wall shake at different times. Ruling out earthquake and other possible ground shakers, I began to wonder about these pipelines. And the first time I experienced this, I called the city. INR didn't know anything about these pipes and referred me to PBOT, which I called but couldn't reach. So I went outside and got the local Kinder Morgan number off the sign and reached someone there who didn't know about any problem with the pipes, but who sent me a crew boss working out in the field, connecting me with the crew boss, and a very nice guy, and he knew of no disturbance and then said to me the words that gave me pause. These tanks, he said, were laid in 1972, the year I graduated from high school, and they were good pipes. This did not inspire confidence. He informed me that ODOT oversees these pipes, and ODOT has informed me that it's PBOT and. Part of my fear of these pipes is their connection to the critical energy infrastructure hub, which stores over 90% of transportation fuels used in Oregon, and millions of gallons of other fossil fuels and chemicals, which are housed in a series of tank farms on a narrow strip of earthquake vulnerable landfill, like the one containing old and rusty tanks off-gassing methane below Linton. Those are the ones nearest me, which the Portland fault line runs through. I know the city has invested in research in the financial risk of this hub, but as far as I know, has not examined risks to place and public health from pollution, and the financial burdens these impacts have placed on frontline communities in Linton and North Portland. The Cascadia subduction earthquake could happen at any minute, making the CEI hub an unmitigated disaster. I have been told these pipes won't matter if that happens. I would love for someone in the city universe to tell me about the pipes I live on top of and to disclose the risk I take living here in non-monetary terms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And unfortunately, I don't know the answers to your question, but I'm certainly willing to have my team, my staff work with you to get those answers. So if you could potentially forward that information to me and the mayor's office, I'd be happy to take a look at it and get back in touch with you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. You bet. Thanks for being here today. Next individual, please, Keelan. I think it is item 374, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. Request of Joanne Rees to address council regarding financial irregularities in neighborhood association and request for technical support.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. You sound
Great.
good.
My name is Joanne Rees, 97266. Neighbors in our neighborhood association, NA, have not received substantive technical assistance from Civic Life. NA has remained the advisory stakeholding voice of the community, expected to reflect city values and abide by ONI standards. When remediation stalls at the Civic Life level, fraud hotline, DA, and DOJ still defer to Civic Life. Oversight by primary regulator Civic Life remains haphazard. In 2017, our NA concerns whistleblew on lack of inclusion and safe brave space. Between 2019 to date, we whistleblew on perceived misappropriation by our NA of city resources such as insurance coverage and city neighborhood allotments heading towards board member projects. Support for diverse, financially struggling communities and neighbors is positive. However, the opportunities seemed only to be offered to a guild of current and former NA board members. Between July 2019 and November 2020, with no itemized treasurer's reports, 67% of the $8,000 taxpayer-funded NA bank account headed to projects or assumed business names of white board members, including $2,000 seed money to a board member to establish a nonprofit. Is this participatory democracy? Failure to address grievances per ONI standards, refusal to acknowledge public record requests, failure to follow bylaws, selectively responsive Gmail address, no public comment at general meetings, attendance at general meetings generally less than the required quorum of 10 people. There may be a conflict of loyalty at the city level. Our NA has had and has former and current city staffers on board. The city currently gives legitimacy and a platform to the NAs beyond that given to other community groups. The city has preventative mechanisms, including ONI standards and a rebranded Civic Life mission. 2012 Ombudsman report found flaws in ONI grievance process that impeded restorative justice. No corrective action was taken. 2015 Ombudsman report mandated city attorney trainings for city advisory body members on ethics, conflict of interest, and equity. Only half the city advisory bodies have participated in the Civic Life facilitated trainings. Neighbors have been spinning our wheels since 2017, only to be gaslit and in some cases disenfranchised. Everyone deserves a place at the table, not just NA board members who goose-step to the city agenda. In tough times, it is irresponsible to continue funding city sectors that can't or won't do the work necessary to minimally and intentionally fulfill their lofty mission statement. Housing needs remain urgent for community neighbors. Tokenized and selective engagement in community and civic life, probably much less so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony. Keelan, did Cassondra Bird get on the call? Do we know? Oh, wait, Commissioner Hardesty had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Joanne for showing up today. I think I know what neighborhood association she's affiliated with, but I just want to say I hear her concerns. There are concerns that, as she said, have been years-long concern, and I just want her to know that we are in the process of correcting some of the major changes that should take place. And I encourage her to reach out to me and my staff if she has some specific information that she'd like to share about her experience. We collectively have to work to make our neighborhood systems better, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Is Cassandra on?
No, she has not joined.
All right, very good. That completes communications. We will move to the consent agenda. There are two items, Keelan, on the consent agenda that I would like to, the first is item 377. I'd like to pull that from back to my office. Could you read that, please?
Authorize a competitive solicitation and price agreements to procure office furniture for an estimated annual amount of $1 million.
All right, that's pulled back. And 378, could you read it as well, please?
Authorize the Director of the Office of Violence Prevention to execute special appropriation grant agreements.
Colleagues, I'm pulling this matter from the consent agenda. I will move it to the end of the regular agenda to propose an amendment clarifying that the Office of Violence Prevention Director is authorized to execute grant agreements and grant amendments through a time certain period. I'll explain that later, but we will pull this for now and move it to the end of the regular agenda. Have any other items been pulled, Keelan?
We've received no other requests.
Please call the roll on the remainder of the consent agenda.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the consent agenda is adopted. Next up is the first time certain item number 375, please.
Authorize grant agreements with 17 organizations for the social equity and educational development initiatives at the Office of Community and Civic Life for a total not to exceed $1,800,000.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I am pleased to introduce Deshita Dawson to present for us today on what I think is one of the most creative programs we have. Take it away, Deshita.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Hardesty and Mayor Wheeler and the rest of the commissioners. I appreciate this time. And I'm going to quickly share my screen as I go through what has been a very interesting first year for me with our cannabis grants. Sorry, internet. Okay, so just at a high level, here's what we'll talk about today. Of course, here for the council's action requested to approve 17 proposed grant recipients for this 2021 seed grant cycle. I'll give a little bit just because I haven't talked to the council as much about our equity-centered regulatory framework, what we're currently working with, but the vision, historical overview of the grant fund, which you've seen when we did our budget session, a little bit more about seed initiatives, and then we'll dive into this year's seed grant fund, talk about timeline, selection committee, the applicant pool, our proposed recipients, and fiscal details. We only have a short amount of time because we are in the process of processing and hopefully for an approved group that is 3 times what we've normally done and short 1 staff. But we also will release later on this year our first 2021 seed initiatives report, which will outline in a much more detailed, colorful, and creative way all of the work that we've done in this last year. Okay, so this is a very busy slide that, you know, orients the commissioners to our current program ecosystem. When I came in, one of the first things I wanted to do was just sort of outline how we were an equity-centered program. We had been operating as such, but not really defined as such. And so what you'll see on the left side is really our core competency, licensing, compliance, and policy. And the things that are colored in are things that we are operating fully. Things that are in gray are still in progress. And the black, I think in our vision, you'll see they'll come to life as there are still some spots that we have to develop. But on our left side, we as the licensing compliance, this is the standard business of being a cannabis program, the regulatory business, which I would say typically across the country has been devoid of equity and mostly meant to be quote unquote neutral. But I think one thing about Portland's program, it has always been very sensible in its vision and in its execution, and therefore way more equitable than other programs across the country. Under there, we have our cannabis policy oversight team, and the about $1 million that we receive in revenue just from licensing and compliance related fees help support the entirety of the program as far as the administrative portions, our technology. As we move into our vision, we have a goal of filling in the technology. We'll come back as we prepare more around that upgrade in the future. But we have a surplus, and it's mainly because we have been underfunding and under supporting what is really a very rapidly growing program. As you think about what we do in the community, we really contribute to growing the cannabis economy, and ultimately that grows the cannabis tax revenue, which right now, thanks to your ruling last year, we get a $1 million ongoing into our seed initiatives. At the time that I took over the program, there was no branding around our grant fund. It was just the Cannabis Social Equity Fund, and it didn't really have as much recognition, and partly because it wasn't an ongoing funding, so hard to plan. So once we got that, we really went into hyperdrive on strategic planning. And that's what leads us to the vision of filling this in. We see the ability to spend a little bit more out of our surplus, filling in the technology, improving our inter-bureau partnerships, whether that's with BDS, and we're already been doing it again informally, but more formally doing it, adding to our marketing and communications. And then on the social equity and educational development side, really improving the grant fund as we get more funding, improving general education and technical assistance for grant fund recipients, but also those equity applicants that will need to go through our licensing process should HB 3112 be passed. But this number increases really because I come from a private sector. I see the branding as an opportunity for public-private partnership in the long run. There are people who want to support what we're doing, corporations, and that's where initiative partnerships really allows us to expand just how much funding we can do, and community reinvestment we can do as well. In the historical overview of the grant, we've done quite well, I think, definitely compared to the rest of the country, and we've led the way as the first program in the country to have reinvestment tied to cannabis tax revenue. Over 70 applications, 1.6 million allocated, 15 grants dispersed. What we found from the many, many hours of work sessions, info sessions, and collecting data from recipients and applicants is that we had a limited priorities, and that limited the grants. And ultimately, we were only really funding expungement, workforce development, and reentry services, and primarily through really large organizations like Work Systems and the like. Going into 2020 and beyond, because of the 1 million ongoing, we really revamped the, again, positioning of the program. Launched officially in 2020, it's really meant to be a source of monitoring, measuring, and reporting on the city's cannabis tax revenues equity investment. Our 1 million is general budget is intended to have a portion go to the grant fund, 800K, and this would be the 5th cycle of that, and then a technical assistance program as well as continuing to support partnerships. We don't have funding there, but we have definitely time that's being put in growing the partnerships, whether it's with Prosper Portland or the potential with private entities that are interested in supporting seed initiatives. Cannabis tax revenue is the sole funding source for seed initiatives and the seed grant fund. And like I said, we'll have a seed initiatives annual report. And the intention behind that is to report on the return on equity investment, the ROEI, which again is becoming a more nationally known term as I share it at the federal level. We need to figure out exactly how well we're doing, and this report guides us on future recommendations, and certainly the City Council on future decisions on allocations. We're, like I said, a national benchmark for equity and restorative justice community reinvestment tied to cannabis tax revenue, recently seeing New York State legalize, and became a full circle moment for me as I'm from Brooklyn and testified about the work we were doing, and then went back several times to share the details of a program that is now going to help New York drive 40% of their cannabis tax revenue into community reinvestment. For our 2021 Seed Grant Fund, again, our aim is to aid, strengthen, and serve restorative justice, community reinvestment, and wealth creation in Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities, which have been disproportionately impacted by over 80 years of cannabis prohibition laws. We adjusted our priority areas as a result of, again, hours of feedback and really looking through all of the 3 years that we had done this prior, and expanded it to include education, economic development, and criminal justice. Our objectives were twofold. We wanted to support programs, projects, initiatives, and/or businesses that uniquely serve BIPOC communities across these 3 priority areas, but also in the second level was to increase the number of BIPOC-led and women-led small businesses and projects funded by SEED, very much supporting a for us, by us model. Our timeline and milestone revealed a lot of kinks in our process, which we intend to improve moving forward. This is the big picture. We basically started in September with the funding announcement and round 1 application released. In October and November, we held multiple live info sessions that were also available on demand, and then released round 1 application that was ultimately due 31 days later on 10/31. In December, the final round application was ultimately due, but that was also released in November for people to preview. We had some COVID-19 impact, 2 months delayed in reviewing and scoring because of the impact to our selection committee. And the key insight for us going forward is more time is required for stronger administration of this program. And it's best if the RFP process is completed prior to allocation, which we'll talk about why we're here proposing this and the shift we'll be able to make. Our grant selection committee was brought together by a number of different groups, 11 individuals in total, including myself. We had council appointed members of the committee, 5, city employees, 3, and 2 CPOP members, and then I acted as facilitator. And the real key insight here is that everyone gave that feedback that SEED needs a standing committee going forward, and I have some recommendations that'll be in the initiatives report on what that may look like as we develop the program. Our applicant pool was plentiful and definitely very diverse. Compared to previous years, we tripled the number of applicants as a result of our outreach and the expansion of our priorities. The grant application categories expanded education, economic development, expungement-related activities, but the majority, as you can see, over 35% had multiple areas in which they touched on, and we were happy to see that nearly 20% also focused on some aspect of cannabis, but we also recognize that that is not usually the way that community reinvestment is needed and also wanted. It's usually a diverse portfolio of investment. Our race and ethnicity was definitely a big goal for us, as we were not getting enough people of color in the applicant pool. Of the whole pool of 123, over 45% identified as Black. This is all self-reported, nearly 5% Indigenous, and over 7% Latinx. On the gender non-binary area, we had over 50% identified as she, her in the leadership and ownership role. For our proposed recipients today, in today's ordinance, we have 17 out of the 40 finalists that we're proposing. 89% are led or owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and 29% led or owned by women. We have a little bit more of the breakdown here, but this is just a sampling of some of the organizations that we are excited to bring on as new recipients. And the range, again, has been quite diverse. We did spend a lot of hours with the selection committee, both in scoring as well as in deliberation, to ensure that we were meeting our objectives. Where we're able to propose 17 versus the original 6 is a bit of a fiscal, I would say, sort of massaging, in that we've been sitting on $1 million allocated at the beginning of this current fiscal year and waiting for our RFP process to be done. Recognizing that we really need to have the RFP process before the allocation, we are basically combining the $1 million that we've been allocated from 2020-21 this fiscal year and future allocation of 21-22, $800K. All recipients will complete work July 2021 through June 2022, and they're all considered the 2021 SEED grant cohort. However, once we move into the 2022 SEED grant cohort, now this RFP will be on the same timing, maybe stretched out a bit longer to give us better administrative abilities, but now it's done before the allocation and we won't be rushing to encumber funds. It ensures the money is dispersed to the community reinvestment sooner. And that I think is a really important goal for us, and I know for council. The remaining $200K in our million allocation for next year's fiscal year will be used for SEED Technical Assistance Program. And I'm happy to answer further questions around that, of course, along with any other questions that we may have around the recipients. And again, we'll be releasing a SEED initiatives report that will detail even more around our proposed recipients. Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how impressed I am that you stayed within the 15 minutes allotted. I was like, there's no way you're going to be able to say all that within that time period. I just want my colleagues to know that the director, we have the pleasure of having a leader of the cannabis program who's nationally known and nationally respected as being a leader in this field. And I just have to say publicly just how thrilled I am that Deshita is working with us at the City of Portland to help us be a national model on both who benefits from cannabis policy, but also how we make sure that we're not creating barriers for those who've been negatively impacted. So just wanted to take a moment and appreciate the fabulous staff we have leading this effort.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Colleagues, any questions before I ask Keelan about public testimony? Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one has signed up for this item.
Very good. This is an emergency ordinance. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, good morning, Ashita. First of all, thank you for your leadership. It was impressive. There was just one question I had, and when you were calling out the communities that you were focusing on for the equity engagement, I didn't hear you call out Pacific Islanders specifically. And I'm sure you're focused on that though, because you don't seem to miss anything. So did I just miss that?
No, you didn't. So one of the things that working on House Bill 3112 revealed in our legislative report is that our data shows that the racially biased enforcement of criminalization disproportionately impacted Black, Indigenous, and Latinx. However, we do include AAPI as well as a tracking, because even though there's no data, that doesn't mean no harm has been done, particularly when we think about immigration. So we are working very closely with the group to ensure, one, they were part of a lot of our work groups, but to ensure that we're able to start tracking data to ensure that we can, I would say, legally and constitutionally support the same race consciousness in the language. We didn't want to be dinged on it because we don't have the data to support it, just to be clear.
I hear you. I bring it up because I found doing equity work and looking at data, how important it was to decouple Pacific Islander from Asian. And you see really different disparities when you do that. So
I think that's actually a really important point, and it's one that I'm still learning is actually a top of mind because of the experience I'm having so far in Oregon. Because I would say in the East Coast, it's not done.
That's why I did it, because I lived in New York and I'm from here, and it's one of those moments where it's a West Coast thing to really target. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Commissioner Ryan. Keelan, do we have any public testimony?
No one signed up for this item.
Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Yes, I'm thrilled about this. I already was, but then that was one of the best reports I've heard in a long time. You just really got to the heart of the matter. And also, I mean, kudos, because it's like you went from 31 to 123 applicants. So that's 3 times as many in 1 year's time. So your fire in your belly coming from the private sector and knowing how important it is to link the partnership between the private and the community sector is so refreshing. It's my lived experience as well. So I'm just so delighted that you're a part of this City of Portland, and we really need your leadership. And anyway, kudos, and I'm excited to vote aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you once again, Deshita, and your fabulous team. You are certainly helping us become national leaders and national thought leaders around how do we make sure that we're undoing the harm of 100 years of really horribly bad policy. So I am so thrilled with both these grants that we're putting out, but also what we're learning through this process. We've learned a lot. in the time that you've been leading this effort, and I expect we'll learn even more from these grants. I'm happy to vote aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty and Deshita and the Civic Life staff for the presentation. Deshita, I just want to say congratulations on a very impactful project and community work. Portland is incredibly lucky to have you here, and we're so grateful for your leadership, and especially for setting the standard for other programs across the country. That is really important. Very intentional in your work, and the project being very deeply rooted in the self-determination of our communities, and that it directly meets the fund's intent of restorative justice and equity, which is really nice to see that actually meet the intent. So I'm very supportive of these seed projects, and I'm really interested in seeing how they develop over time. The recipients clearly are doing really important work, so I'm very happy to vote aye.
Wheeler,
This is a terrific move for this program, and I appreciate it. I'm happy to vote aye. Thank you. Great presentation, Deshita. The ordinance is approved. Next item is time certain 376, please.
Thank you so much, commissioners.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
authorize a 3-year intergovernmental agreement with Portland State University to partner on projects and planning related to emergency management not to exceed $500,000.
Colleagues, this ordinance formalizes the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management's relationship with Portland State University. PBEM's work to coordinate emergency preparedness and response planning across the city requires collaboration, of course, with other bureaus as well as community partners, as well as the incorporation of technical information from across many different disciplines. For the past few years, PBEM has been assisted in their work by PSU students, many of whom come from Portland and remain right here in our beautiful city post-graduation. Today, we're going to hear from the Bureau of Emergency Management, Portland State University Vice President for Government Relations, Kevin Neely, and PSU student, Rika Perez. I'm going to turn it over to the Interim Director of PBEM, Jana Papathemiou. Papathemiou. I'm going to get this right.
You're going to get it, sir.
I owe you the respect of getting it right. Could you say it once for me, Jana?
Certainly. Jana Papathemiou.
Jana Papathemiou.
You got it.
Thank you for being here. And she's going to walk us through the ordinance. Thank you. And by the way, thank you while I've got you here, not just for this ordinance, thank you for your leadership over the course of the last year. We have called on you many, many times, and you've really done an outstanding job, you and your whole team. And I didn't want the day to go by without saying that. So thank you and welcome. Commissioner Hardesty has a comment up front. Nope. Go ahead, John.
Thank you so much. It has been such a challenging year in many ways, and such a pleasure and an honor to be able to be of service to the city at such a remarkable time. Today, for the record, I'm Jana Papathemiou. I'm the Interim Director at the Bureau of Emergency Management, and I'm here to talk about a new agreement with Portland State University. For the past few years, PBEM has been fortunate to partner with PSU to tackle citywide challenges in a collaborative way. PSU has helped us to organize tabletop exercises around climate change and around catastrophic earthquakes. They've actually loaned us their facility and resources to do data visualizations, and they've even prepared reports and findings for us about the workshops that we did together. And they've also staffed the city's Disaster Resilience Action Group. They even helped us with notes, they bought donuts, they've been a tremendous support. Their contributions have greatly increased our Bureau's capacity and given us the opportunity to tap into subject matter experts from across the university. In doing this work, PSU has leveraged private philanthropy to support their engagement with us. And we're really grateful for the commitment they show to our mission to build a more resilient Portland. And we see that it aligns with their purpose to let knowledge serve the city. So the master agreement I'm bringing today represents the next step in our partnership. Up to now, we've worked with PSU on projects that have been funded by others. This agreement allows PBEM to pay PSU from our existing Bureau budget to accomplish specific tasks for us, such as plan updates. So to be super clear, this isn't new money, but it's dollars that we would otherwise spend on one-time projects and consulting. This 3-year agreement permits us to bring forward projects as we have budget and time to support them, up to $500,000 worth of projects over the next 3 years. I expect that the first task orders on this project will be to update our earthquake response plan, which sadly is out of date, and to work with the Disaster Resilience Action Group that I mentioned to write a resilient plan for city infrastructure, and also to work with the City Asset Management Group on training to operationalize an equity policy. And we're also already thinking about a project next year to improve our ability to serve Portlanders with disabilities and engage them more fully in our other planning processes. PBEM has a lot of work to catch up on after this last pandemic year. For us, partnering with PSU is the most cost-effective way to catch up on our work rather than trying to hire more staff or work with for-profit emergency management consultants. As a university, PSU shares our commitment to including diverse perspectives in their work and to being data-driven. Working with PSU also supports PBEM to have our own organizational culture of learning. Finally, this partnership creates an opportunity to staff to work with students, which is totally energizing for us, brings more youthful perspectives to our work, and it introduces students to careers in public service. So in short, we think it's a win-win. With that, I'd like to turn it over to PSU Vice President Kevin Neely.
Mayor Wheeler and commissioners, good morning. It's great to see everybody today and really appreciate the opportunity to testify. My name is Kevin Neely, you just heard, and I'm the Vice President for University Relations at Portland State. My primary goal today is to offer our strong support for this 3-year intergovernmental agreement related to emergency management and resiliency and coordinated through the Bureau of Emergency Management. But before I dive into that effort, President Percy asked me to share with the Commission his strident commitment to deepening the relationship between the city and the university over the coming months, weeks, years. Our commitment to let knowledge serve the city has never been stronger, and in our view, is more important now than ever before. We are here for Portland. I am very pleased to let you all know that we will be welcoming back over 20,000 students, faculty, and staff to the South Park blocks this September. I am absolutely certain that restoring the vibrancy of our campus will quickly translate into vibrancy for the Central City. So we're really excited and working hard to ensure the safe return of our community. President Percy also wanted me to remind you that this year is PSU's 75th anniversary. As part of that celebration, we're going to be opening the doors of the new Vanport building, that image behind me. That building really embodies our commitment to partnership and collaboration. It houses the Portland Community College Low-Income Dental Clinic, the PSU OHSU School of Public Health, the PSU College of Education, and in our third effort with the city, it will be the new home for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Keep an eye at your inboxes. We'll be sending out an invitation to a ribbon cutting pretty soon and hope to do that this fall, the pandemic permitting. That said, sharing space is not really as important as our goal of sharing ideas and innovations across the city and across the community. That's at the heart of today's intergovernmental agreement. I thank Mayor Wheeler and Director Papa F. Demiu for the partnership of PBEM. Agreements like this create space for cooperative, research-driven policymaking. They spark new ideas within bureaus and across our campus. They provide critical information for key decision makers, and they truly enrich the livability of the city that we all call home. What energizes me most, however, and you heard it referred to by both the mayor and the director, is that PSU's partnership with bureaus opens the doors for our students to share their unique insights with city staff as they gain the critical skills that they need and that will transform into jobs that will further improve our community. Many of those students end up right there at the city doing absolutely critical work. I am so very pleased that Rika Perez is with us today, and she'll talk about the work that she's been doing with PBEM. As we work to maximize the impact of this IGA for the Bureau, we look forward to working with other bureaus to establish similar arrangements. In the coming weeks, President Percy is creating a new Office of Strategic Engagement at PSU that will identify intersection points between the university and our regional civic partners, community-based organizations, and local businesses. We're very excited about it. For PSU, it unlocks our potential by bringing together diverse, multidisciplinary expertise across our campus to truly let knowledge serve the city. For our many partners, the City of Portland chief among them, we are confident that this new effort will amplify the already strong spirit of collaboration that's a hallmark of this wonderful city. I really appreciate your time, allowing me to be here today, your support for this agreement, and for PSU across the board. I would happily answer any softball questions, and then, of course, mercifully mute myself so you can hear from the experts and from Rika.
Kevin, you're always selling yourself a little short. We know that you can handle any questions we could possibly put your way. Colleagues, any questions for Kevin at this particular juncture? Very good. We'll stand by. And next up is Rika Perez, a PSU student. This is exciting. Welcome, Rika.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Rika Perez. I am a first-year Master of Urban and Regional Planning student at Portland State University. And I'm also a graduate assistant at the Institute for Sustainable Solutions. So over the past several months, working at ISS has given me the opportunity to collaborate with planners, engineers, and project managers while learning valuable technical and interpersonal skills that I will continue to use in my career. As a woman of color, it is often difficult to see myself in this professional setting, working alongside city employees and communicating with city officials. But through ISS, I have gained confidence in myself and in my abilities. My supervisors recognize and nurture my strengths and help me develop areas of improvement by encouraging me to take on responsibilities outside of my comfort zone. However, what I appreciate the most from my experience with ISS is their commitment to positive social change. I am able to pursue my professional goals through projects such as PBEM's 2021 Mitigation Action Plan, while aligning with my personal values and beliefs of equity and restorative justice. This is an experience that I hope will prepare me in my future career focused on environmental planning, food sovereignty, and health equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Rika. We appreciate your taking time to be here this morning and sharing your perspective. And we're excited for you and excited for what the future holds. You're already making a notable difference, and you just aced it in front of the Portland City Council. So good work there too. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. And Rika, I was going to ask you, is this your first presentation in front of Portland City Council?
Yes. Yeah.
I am extremely impressed. There are a whole lot of people 4 times your age that wouldn't have done as great a job as you did. You did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
And I want to say to PSU, I am so impressed with the continued growth and the community partnerships that are being created. I could not thank PSU Houseless Consortium enough for being with us with Portland Street Response from the very beginning. I am really, really impressed with where Portland State University is headed and this deep commitment to working deeply, right? Not just surface-wise, but really deeply in helping us solve these very complex problems. We need your expertise so that we at City Council can be better. And this is a great partnership for us to continue with. So please send my great appreciation to your president and to the vision you're moving forward. Thank you so much for being here today, all of you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for that presentation. You're a great team. And I concur with the comments by Commissioner Hardesty. Rika, that was a great presentation. I was looking into what work you have done and where you're going, and I just want to make sure that I put words out on this. Are you focusing also on the threat of a big urban fire in the city when you're looking at some of the natural disasters that we could face?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely we are. Right now, Portland Emergency Management is partnered with Multnomah County to update our Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which is an effort that's ongoing and that includes actions to mitigate risk over time. And we've also been working closely with Portland Fire, Portland Parks, Homeless Urban Camping Impact Reduction Program, and Joint Office of Homeland Services to make plans for this summer specifically.
Right. I was digging in just a little bit before the meeting. I just didn't see that in the notes that I had. So I appreciate hearing that. Anyway, sounds good. Good work. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this emergency ordinance?
No one signed up for this item, Mayor.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Yes, great presentation. I'm really excited about the university opening back up, by the way, in the fall. Boy, we really, I remember every time there's a break in the sessions, you always would be able to find parking in South Portland. And I used to celebrate that. Now it's like, bring it back. So anyway, but to the point, I vote aye.
Hardesty,
I'm looking forward to seeing what we accomplish together. I vote aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Jonna, and PBEM for bringing this forward. And thank you, Kevin and Rika, for your presentation. Really impressed by the great work. Also very impressed by the student leadership that comes out of PSU consistently like Rika. I'm glad to support this partnership to continue to build our resiliency capabilities. I vote aye.
Wheeler,
Well, great presentation. Thank you, Director Papa Ethemiou. Thank you to Kevin Neely and Rika Perez. Great presentation, great partnership. We should support this. It can only make us all much better. And Rika, I just want to add one more comment, which is that Portland State plays an incredibly important role in supporting our community. And that's what makes it different maybe than a lot of other universities around the country. PSU has a strong interest in what we do here and helps us to get things better here. And so I really appreciate your having chosen a local university that focuses on local needs. And obviously you're taking full advantage of it. And that speaks well to you personally, and I think is a harbinger of great things to come in your future. So thank you especially for being here today. I'm happy to vote aye. The ordinance is approved. Thanks, colleagues. To the regular agenda, item number 385, please.
City Council to convene as Budget Committee to correct tax levy for FY 2021-22 approved budget.
Colleagues, this item provides for a technical correction to our provision of tax levies in order to recognize the first year of the park's local option levy, in addition to our existing levies, which we approved 2 weeks ago. To make this correction, I'll need to convene the Budget Committee, read a script, call for a vote to approve the levies, and then I will adjourn the meeting of the Budget Committee. Budget Director Kennard, of course, will be available to answer any questions. So with that, I'm now convening this meeting of the City of Portland Budget Committee. The city, item number 3, vote to approve the tax levies. As you know, the Budget Committee approved tax levies on May 13th, 2021, and must also add the recently approved parks local option levy. The city shall levy its full permanent rate of $4.5770 per $1,000 of assessed value, and $27,763,868 for the payment of voter-approved general obligation bond principal and interest, and $209,860,034 for the obligation for the Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Fund, and 80 cents per $1,000 of assessed value for the park's local option levy, and $0.4026 per $1,000 of assessed values for the children's levy. Furthermore, the city shall levy the amounts listed in the attachment E for urban renewal collections. And with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the tax levies.
So moved.
Commissioner Hardesty moves. Can I get a second?
Second.
Commissioner Ryan seconds. With that, Keelan, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Director Kennard, does that satisfy you? Very good. With that, this meeting of the City of Portland Budget Committee is now adjourned. 386, please.
Amend contract with SAP Public Services, Inc. to increase the not to exceed value by $293,000 for software cloud services through June 2022.
Colleagues, this ordinance authorized continued funding the existing budget appropriations for SAP. SAP is a citywide online platform used for onboarding, for training, for performance management, as well as goal management. The annual extension of services will allow for better renegotiation of the city's on-premises as well as online SAP contracts in the year 2022. Enterprise Business Solutions Manager Diana Allen is here today to present the ordinance. Welcome, Diana. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Diana Allen. I'm the Division Manager of the Enterprise Business Solutions team and the Bureau of Technology Services supporting the city's SAP system. And I appreciate the opportunity to present this to you today. I did have some slides. If the clerk could actually pull those up for me, that would be awesome. And you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I'm here today seeking authorization to amend contract 30005306 with SAP Public Services to increase the value by $293,000 for a not to exceed amount of $1,444,810 for software cloud services through June 2022. This provides the continued funding to support the subscription charges for 1 year for our SAP SuccessFactors modules implemented for citywide use. It's important to note that the funding for this will be funded by EBS's existing budget appropriations with no additional or new funding required. Next slide, please. As background, SAP is an enterprise-wide software platform. It was implemented in 2009 and built around the city's business processes in finance, human resources, procurement, and other activities with interfaces to multiple systems across the city. The system manages an immense amount of data and day-to-day transactional operations and ensures that we have a secure, auditable, and effective platform to manage city operations. In working with our stakeholders across the city, we developed a 5-year roadmap that was approved by the Technology Executive Steering Committee and aligns with the OMF strategic goals, adopting 21st century business solutions and developing an inclusive and talented workforce. In 2016, the city entered into the contract that we're speaking about today with SAP Public Services for cloud services, which allows for delivery of software and analytics on multiple device types, including mobile, via the internet to enhance and expand the city's investment in our SAP platform. Next slide, please. The modules that will be supported with this amendment are the learning management system, which allows the city employees to receive and track training for both citywide and bureau-specific training. It supports in-person and virtual instructor-led training and online training courses, which of course has and continues to be very important during this significant increase in our remote workforce due to the pandemic. The second module is onboarding. So this module interfaces with NeoGov, which is our recruitment software. And when a candidate is offered a position and signs an offer letter, the process in onboarding begins. Onboarding is there to enhance and streamline the user experience for new city employees by connecting new employees to their teams, providing online forms and information, and it's integrated with DocuSign so that they can sign forms such as the I-9, and it has task lists for HR managers, and it helps to really ensure a smooth transition for new employees into the employment with the city. And the third module is performance and goals management. So that hosts an online performance review process to provide goals and objectives and a regular cadence of feedback and support. So instead of having a yearly performance review, this software along with the new process that BHR has created allows for multiple checkpoints and really strong communication between managers and employees to set goals and objectives, have discussions about those, and And also importantly, it supports the calibration cycle to ensure transparency and equity on how employees are assessed and rewarded across the same job class. This was assessed for TOC oversight, but because these are smaller subscription-based cloud applications with low risk, they did not meet the threshold for TOC oversight that normally oversees large, complex, high-risk technology projects, which these are not. This was ready for implementation in June of 2020, but due to the pandemic, we, along with our BHR partners, chose to delay the implementation until July of this year. So that will be up and coming. Training is happening now, and we're looking forward to getting that underway. The other point I'll make about these three applications is that they support consistent citywide processes and are replacing manual and disparate bureau-specific processes. Next slide, please. So approval of this ordinance will fund SAP Public Services cloud contracts for 1 year to coincide with the same renewal date of June 30th, 2022 for our on-premise contract. So we have an on-prem contract that is fully funded through June of 30th of 2022, which is the reason why we're asking for just a 1 year extension of this contract. So what this will do for us, it allows us to continue support of critical citywide HR systems and further positions us to renegotiate both our SAP contracts at the end of June 30th, 2022. And the goal being that we want to look for synergies across both contracts and get the best pricing for the city going forward. And just as another note, further funding for the contract extensions for both SAP contracts will be included in the base budgets in future years and presented to council at the time of the extension. Next slide, please. So in summary, I'm asking for authorization to amend contract 30005306 for $293,000 to fund our implemented cloud services through June 2022. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Very good. Keelan, is there any public testimony on this ordinance?
No one signed up for this item.
All right, it's an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Thank you, Diane Allen. That was a great report. You made your case. It was really clear. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
It can only help. I'm happy to vote aye. Thanks, Diana. Good presentation. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
You have a good day.
Thank you.
You bet. 387, please, Keelan.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and award of 5 contracts to provide vehicle upfitting services for a 5-year term and total amount not to exceed $5 million.
Colleagues, this ordinance authorizes City Fleet to award contracts to perform what are called vehicle upfitting services. City Fleet provides, maintains, and repairs 4,200 vehicles for city bureaus and other government agencies. Given the specialized nature of city work, many vehicles City Fleet maintains require non-standard specialty equipment and tools, which results in about 300 upfitting projects each year. Historically, City Fleet has procured upfitting vendors on a repair-by-repair basis for projects where they lack the resources to complete the work themselves. The lack of standard contracts for that work has slowed the volume of repairs, it's reduced efficiency in some cases, and frankly, it's made it difficult to standardize service quality. A multi-year price agreement will allow City Fleet to upfit more vehicles in less time, stabilize pricing, and provide better oversight of the vendors who are performing the work. We have Chief Procurement Officer Kathleen Brenes-Marua and Procurement Supervisor Jeff Blade, both with us here today to present the ordinance. Welcome, Kathleen and Jeff.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Kathleen Brenes-Marua, Interim Chief Procurement Officer, and I am here to recommend that Council authorize procurement services and fleet to enter into 5 price agreements for vehicle uplifting services for an amount not to exceed $5 million. On December 28th of 2020, we issued a request for proposals for vehicle uplifting services, and on January 27th, we received 7 proposals. An evaluation committee scored the proposals in accordance with Chapter 5.33 of City Code and deemed the following vendors as responsive and qualified proposers. And we are recommending awarding contracts to Day Wireless, Pacific Service Center, Pacific Truck Colors, RC Display Vans, and Systems for Public Safety. All the awardees are in full compliance with all city contracting requirements, and I recommend you authorize these contracts. Jeff and I are happy to answer any questions about the solicitation process. We also have Alan Bates from City Fleet if you have any questions about the uplifting services program.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question, Director.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director. My question is really around the diversity of the staff who will be receiving these contracts. I noticed the breakdown is 2.5 million for systems for public safety, and 1.5 million is the next largest contract. Can you tell me whether these are minority or women-owned firms, or what these firms would do to bring minority and women-owned firms into this contract?
So these are not minority, these are not certified firms, minority-owned or women-owned firms. We did in the solicitation process do outreach and try to find vendors available for these services that were minority-owned and none proposed. As far as the workforce and what they have committed to do on these contracts, that is something that we'll be working with the various contractors and encouraging, but I don't have specific data on what they're going to be bringing.
So that wasn't part of the RFP asking them how they were going to diversify their workforce or subcontract? That wasn't a question that was asked?
That was a question that was asked. I don't have specific information of their commitments at this time of the workforce diversification that they're going to bring forward.
Let me just say I'm troubled by that statement that we don't know. We don't have that information about what the due diligence was, whether or not we are doing sole source agreements that don't provide opportunities for minority and women-owned firms. So I'm concerned about that.
Very good, Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you for that. Anybody else have any questions before I ask about public testimony? Seeing none, Keelan, do we have public testimony on this item?
No one signed up for this item.
Very good. 387 is an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
No.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Wait.
Yeah.
It is not adopted. It's an emergency ordinance. Wow, we haven't done this one in a while. I'd like to switch my vote, please. I vote no for procedural reasons. The ordinance fails. I'd like to call for a motion for reconsideration.
Second.
Commissioner Hardesty seconds the call for reconsideration. Colleagues, the purpose of this is I'm going to request that we amend to remove the emergency clause, and that'll give us a week, and that might also give Director Brenis Marua a little time to work through some of the legitimate questions that Commissioner Hardesty raised. So can I get a second for, we have a second for reconsideration. Please call the roll on reconsideration.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The reconsideration vote passes. 387 is under reconsideration. Colleagues, I would like to move to remove the emergency designation from item 387. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Ryan. Please call the roll on the amendment.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. This is a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you. Next
Thank
item.
you.
Yep, you bet. Thank you. Next item is a second reading, 388, please.
Authorize a borrowing of not more than $60,470,000 in anticipation of the Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Fund levy for FY 2021-22.
Colleagues, this item and a number following our second readings, that means we've had presentations on this and the other items. We've had opportunities for public testimony. Is there any further business on item 388? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 389, second reading. Any further business? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mayor, did you want me to read the title for 380?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course. Sorry, I jumped the gun a bit there.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of efficiency moves going on here at City Hall, but that's probably one we shouldn't take. 389, please read it.
Authorize execution of an amended and restated agreement with Sport Oregon for national and international sports marketing activities and event recruiting services to extend contract by 5 years, not to exceed $275,000 over 5 years.
Second reading, any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
I want to say once again how impressed I am with Sport Oregon, that they rose to the occasion when we asked them to focus on equity and what that would look like. I am really impressed with the progress they've made over the year. I'm happy to vote aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Item 390, also a second reading.
Authorize Bureau of Environmental Services to acquire certain permanent and temporary property rights necessary for construction of the South Portland Burlingame Phase 2 Sewer Rehab Project through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority, project number E11080.
This is the second reading. Any further business? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 391, also a second reading.
Revise sewer and stormwater rates, charges, and fees in accordance with the FY 2021-22 sewer user rate study.
Any further business on this second reading item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 392, non-emergency ordinance.
Declare surplus real property at 5 Water Bureau locations and request authorization to dispose of the properties.
Commissioner Maps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, the ordinance before us today deals with 5 Water Bureau properties that are no longer needed to deliver water. The Water Bureau has determined that the public interest is best served by selling each property at fair market value. We have approached the Housing Bureau to see if they would be interested in purchasing these properties to use as a houseless shelters or affordable housing. They declined to purchase these properties, probably because each of these properties has essentially an industrial use. 4 of the 5 properties are water tanks. 1 is a pump station. These specific properties includes the Cullen View tank at 118 Southwest Alice Street. We also have the Fulton Pump Station at 540 South Nevada. We have the Newport Bay Tank at 11950 North Center Avenue. We also have the Salmon Street Tank at 11805 Southeast Salmon. And finally, we have the St. John's Tank at 7020 North Oswego Avenue. Here today to talk about the disposition of these properties is Water Bureau Property Manager Tom Klutz. And I also noticed that Commissioner Hardesty has her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Before Thomas presents, I'm just curious. I thought all the city bureaus were looking for land that we could possibly use temporarily for houseless, self-managed camps. And so I was surprised to see this item. So I know the Housing Bureau may not want it, but is this land suitable for us to put temporary camps on down?
I believe staff, both in my office and at the Water Bureau, have done a preliminary evaluation of this. I believe a similar thing has happened over at the Housing Bureau. I believe that Mr. Klutz is probably best positioned to address that question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Am I on? I can't tell.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, Director Solmer. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Tom Klutz. I'm the Property Acquisition and Services Manager for the Portland Water Bureau. And yeah, thank you very much, Commissioner Mapps, for introducing exactly what we have on the agenda today. I'll kind of go through a little bit of a history on a few of these things and then address Commissioner Hardesty's concern as well. These 5 properties that you see before us have gone through Administration Rule 1302, which allows the Water Bureau and other bureaus to present those to other bureaus for to see if they have some need. Initially, we started with 9 properties. 3 of those properties were pulled off the agenda because there were some other needs with both PBOT and with the Bureau with BES. A 4th property in talking about structures and land has been identified as a property that Housing Bureau is wanting to purchase, but will come up with another ordinance after July, and for funding and some various reasons. But it is a property that they want to use for low-income housing. There's 2 lots there, but again, we'll discuss that at a later date. So before you have the 5 properties that all have structures on them. They have high-rise tanks. Some of them are very small properties, but they fit the tank site, the footprint very well. We've got a pump station that looks like a house that's just a big building in the middle of the neighborhood down in Nevada Street. And so what Commissioner Mapps had said is exactly correct. No longer needed, vetted through the Water Bureau, and of course, we've got some issues with pulling these down. It would certainly be part of the negotiation of when we dispose of them to potential buyers. Commissioner Hardesty, in response to your question, these properties that have tanks are somewhat of a danger in that they are locked up under key. There's ladders that people can climb up on these tanks. There's some property underneath them, but they are high rise and on stilts. They're not concrete tanks, they're steel tanks. The concrete ones are easier because they're round. We can implode them on each other and kind of haul it away and smooth out the dirt. This isn't the case with the other 4. These are tanks that are up in the air, 100, 150 feet in the air. And so they take a little bit more doing in terms of making them ready for a possible folks below them. And again, the concern is we've had a lot of people climb these tanks, paint various tanks around the city. What we've seen, out on I-205, you can probably see that one tank that we go out to, but it's one of those places where areas where it's kind of a tougher area, and we're concerned about the safety going forward. There are some discussion points, public comments that came in that I've kind of generalized in Exhibit D, and so certainly I have any emails and that type of thing regarding that. So with that, again, we have evaluations going on 3 of the tanks because they have cell sites on them currently and has some revenue to the city. And so that's a concern to us on that value. And it certainly will make a difference in the value when we go to sell it. But we are waiting for those to come in sometime in June for the appraisals. So with that, I want to thank you, Commissioner Mapps and Director Selmer, for all your support. And if there's any questions, I'd love to answer those.
Thank you, Thomas. I don't guess you still have made the case to me why we're not trying to use as much available land as possible, just knowing what our current situation is and what's coming as of June 30th. So what I heard you say was we would have to do something to make those areas safe for people to be able to be in that space. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do something to make it safe for people to be able to safely camp in those areas. So I'm not challenging you or Director Solmer, but I am challenging my council colleagues. If we're serious about this, why are we continuing to sell land that we could potentially use for other purposes? So I just want to ask my colleagues, if we're serious about, like, we have a crisis, let's act like we have one rather than doing what we always do, which is we've got this policy that this is what we do, but is that the right thing for us to do at this moment?
Commissioner Mapps.
I understand and share Commissioner Hardesty's concern. I think one way to understand the unique challenges of housing people on these particular properties have to do with the cost associated with taking down these tanks. And so I might try to answer at least part of Commissioner Hardesty's question by asking Thomas, do you know how much it would cost us to take down these tanks?
You know, we don't. We have somewhat of an idea, but that idea is anywhere from a low of $90,000 up to, I've heard, as high as $175,000. In fact, later in the week, I'm going to have a discussion with Director Solmer about the possibility of doing that in the future. And do we want to take on that exercise to see what it's really going to cost us?
Sure.
Very good. Any further questions for right now? Commissioner Ryan has a question or comment. Commissioner Ryan.
Yeah, it might be both. I appreciate this dialogue we're having right now. I just saw this on the, anyway, we need to have this dialogue because when I heard those numbers, Thomas, they didn't blow me away. It's gonna take some money to reconvert sites to the villages that we need to build. We had some preliminary dialogue yesterday about using our emergency funds for such efforts. So yeah, I think this needs some deeper exploration before we, and I get the one site, Thomas, that the Housing Bureau did deem usable for building affordable housing. Of course, that's different than how we're going to look at the site of villages. So I think the mindset has to shift from just the read of the Housing Bureau for affordable housing structures to now looking at the sites for villages with services. So thank you for this conversation that we're having right now. I'm glad we're having it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Rubio.
I too want to just thank everyone for opening up the dialogue around this. I think we're learning as we go on this. So I appreciate even having the ability to ask these questions. I am curious, and it's a related question, but it's actually towards Commissioner Ryan. Can you just give us an update on how it's coming along regarding the surplus sites and what the deadline is for our bureaus, just so that we have an idea, we're reminded of how much time we have?
Yeah, as you know, we have the weekly meeting, the Streets to Stability Task Force on Thursdays that our office coordinates. And we are looking to bring an ordinance to the council in probably the second week of June to this point, and it is all about locating these sites. And so this is so timely. We obviously did the shelter to housing ordinance work, the zoning work, but now we have to move it into actual action and implement these ideas. So I would say stay tuned for the meeting tomorrow that all of our staff attends, and we'll just keep moving this along. And I think that this item, I think we have to be really careful to not rush this, because these are part of the discussion of where those properties are. It always sounds a lot easier to find these properties than it is. And so it was smart for us to just take a pause and have some top of mind dialogue today about the need for further exploration of these sites. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Based on this dialogue, I think maybe, I don't know what Commissioner Mapps is thinking based on this dialogue, but I would be comfortable with tabling this until we actually have an opportunity to really investigate whether or not it would be cost prohibitive for us to actually utilize this land for temporary shelter. It would be silly of us to sell it and then find out that, in fact, we could have actually invested a couple of dollars and made it worthwhile for folks who are houseless. So I don't know where Commissioner Mapps is on that, but that would be my recommendation.
I'm fine with tabling this item. I do think that there's some productive conversation that we can have about the mechanics of how we might move forward with exploring how to use these properties more fully. So if we want to table it, that's fine. And then maybe we can have a staff level discussion or council level discussion about how to dispose of these properties.
Why don't you think on that? I'll go back to Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. Actually, I was gonna support the recommendation that I made to Commissioner Mapps. But what I was going to also say is it might be helpful if we have these before we have the full list. If the Bureau would come with information about what would be the cost to make it usable, right? So if you have a tank in the middle of the lot, what would it cost to take that tank down? As we're working our way through this, and I know all of us have the right spirit. The question is just timing and how we get what we need in that time period. But I do think if we're going to be considering this any more of these land sales, it would be very proactive to come to council ready to say, and if you wanted to use it for an alternative purpose, this is what it would cost to make it usable.
Commissioner Hardesty, this is Gabriel Salmer. We can get that information for you. We might also want to look in this process at when is the appropriate time in the surplus process because we do offer the land to the other bureaus. So maybe there needs to be an adjustment to that process to make sure that earlier in the process, we are really asking the bureaus to consider it for all of these purposes. As you heard, housing, really looked at it for affordable housing, for structures. I don't know that we're far enough along in this process that the bureaus have been considering it for the needs that council is mentioning today. So I don't know that that's a flaw in the process. I just think that we need to adjust it given what we know now.
Yeah, I agree with you, Director. I think it's new thinking on our part, right? The City Council has a new focus. So rather than your first thing going to bureaus and saying, do you want to buy it? The first thing may be to assess whether or not this would be appropriate for temporary shelter. I don't know if that, sorry, Director, I don't know if that means that we have to do something at the council level in order to just direct bureaus to do that. But when I saw this, it struck me that, well, wait a minute, are we going to sell this? And we're actually haven't had the other conversation. So I think this was really a healthy conversation. I guess the question is for us as the electeds, it's kind of how are we going to direct our bureaus as we're in this middle ground?
That would be really helpful to have that conversation and to let us know how we can carry out what the council wants. It may not be necessary or really advisable to have the land be still in the water portfolio, depending on who is going to do the management of that. So that's my consideration is at what point in the process do we sell or transfer the land to the right organization, whether that's within the city or not, that can do that work, so that we don't have it caught up in land that the ratepayers are paying for.
Yeah, and that gets to my question, because this is going to require a change to established code or to established city code, correct, around the disposal of surplus lands. And particularly in our utility-based lands, we have been sued previously for not seeking the highest dollar valuation of our assets. We've been successfully sued, I believe, on that front, in fact. And so this would require us to revisit city code and the entirety of the disposition policy and a legal analysis consistent with what we now know about less than full economic value for our ratepayers. Is that something we can do quickly, or is this something that's going to tie these properties up for another 2 years?
I think, Mayor, that we can certainly find out what the costs are, who would bear those costs, whether that would be a general fund cost or whether the ratepayers can be charged to make these properties whole for these other intended purposes. I think we would need some legal discussion about that. I think we can certainly expedite those conversations with the city attorney's office and find that out. But obviously the changes to the disposition process would take a little bit more time.
And I'll turn this back to the Commissioner Hardesty in a sec, but wouldn't that require us, the council, the city, to purchase these at full market value? In other words, wouldn't we have to be there along with the bidders and win the bidding?
I believe that the disposition process allows us to transfer the land within the city before we get out to that bidding process. So we don't have to bid along with the private market.
Do we have to provide a market rate as determined by somebody?
Tom, you probably have the answer to that.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct, Mayor.
May I jump in to this conversation? Thank you.
Yeah, and then Commissioner Hardesty.
Right. Without getting into any legal advice regarding this issue, the issue before the courts was not paying the full market rate. It was just making sure that the expenditures reasonably related to the provision of sewer and water services. We have not litigated the necessity to pay full market rate or even to sell property.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Commissioner Hardesty, then back to Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, like be careful what you ask. You figure out just how many cans of worms you open up. As we were having this conversation, I realized it's going to get a little more complicated when you add different governmental jurisdictions into this land bank opportunity. So it may be really appropriate to get some legal advice early as we're talking to other governments and changing how we do this within the city of Portland, so that we're not, as the mayor just pointed out, going down a path that will lead us to some unnecessary litigation. So I do think all of us have a lot of work to do to make sure. But the question that came up for me was, we're still in a state of emergency. And I think being in a state of emergency gives us more flexibility than we would have if we were not. But I don't know what that means as far as ratepayer heroes. So I'll stop talking now and turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Ryan.
Thanks, Commissioner Hardesty. I just want to say that this is a conversation. If it was on the dais maybe even 3 months ago, we would have had maybe a different response. But here we are today. Today's, what is it, May 26th. And we know that we're bringing an ordinance forward that the people want, which is for us to site safe sleep villages that we can start building. And so we have to be creative and resourceful, and it won't be easy to find these properties. And so timing is everything. And someone needs to mute. And anyway, timing is everything. And I just want to thank you, Thomas and Director Salmar, for being with us at this moment of action. And I look forward to the conversations that will take place in the Streets to Stability Task Force meeting tomorrow that all of our offices participate in. So great timing for this to come forward. I know it didn't go in the way that you might have imagined, but again, here we are. Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner, any other questions before I ask about public testimony? Commissioner Matt, or do we have anybody who signed up? If we did, I want to hear them out. Keelan.
Oh, no one signed up for this item, Mayor.
All right, so the next step, Commissioner Maps, hate to throw it to you, but it's your call.
We can table it. Why don't we have discussion, further discussions at staff level? Obviously, there are a lot of complex issues involved here, especially because it's a ratepayer bureau. So we have some constraints which are unique, but it's certainly worthwhile to have an additional conversation, I believe. Although I kind of want to pull in Director Salmner here to see if she has a recommendation. You still there?
Yes, Commissioner Maps, I completely agree. These are parcels that we have deemed surplus that we do not need for water needs. That doesn't mean that we can't continue to do the maintenance and to keep these up while the conversation is occurring. So we can certainly give the council the time and the space that it needs so that we are making the right decision on the disposition.
Thank you, Director. Is that enough guidance, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I think so. So that is, we'll just call that referred to your office.
All right, great.
No, that was a great discussion. No, that was actually a great discussion now. Worth the price of admission for all of us. Thank you all, and thank you, Commissioner Maps, for your flexibility on that. Item 393 is a second reading as the one after it is as well. Can you read 393, please?
Authorize the rates and charges for water and water-related services beginning July 1, 2021 to June 30, 2022, and fix an effective date.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Sorry, I'm having the hardest time getting to my mute button. Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Commissioner Ryan, that's why I always do stretching exercises before council so I can reach that mute button, which, by the way, I think we all acknowledge is in the wrong place ergonomically. They haven't quite thought the mute button through yet. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next, item 394, also a second reading.
Revise residential solid waste and recycling collection rates and charges effective July 1, 2021.
Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
It's actually, I think my mouse needs a battery. Anyway, yes. Aye.
Hardesty.
You got a mouse? That is old school. Aye.
You don't call these mouse anymore? Clicker.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
It's with the horseless carriage, my friend, with the horseless carriage. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Why don't we skip one and get rid of the last second reading just so I don't forget it. Item 396 is also a second reading. Could we take care of that one, please?
Amend fee schedule for tree permits.
Any further discussion on this second reading item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
We just went to 396.
Yeah, I did.
All right, thanks. Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Back to 395, please, a report.
Accept the Title 11 Improvement Project scope of work to update the tree code and urban forest management plan.
Mr. Rubio.
Thank you. In January 2020, City Council Resolution 37473 directed Portland Parks and Recreation and the Bureau of Development Services to return to City Council with a high-level scope of work for improvements to Title 11. This report responds to that resolution with a multi-phased approach to improving the city's tree code and the management of Portland's forest infrastructure. The report was developed by Portland Parks and Recreation in coordination with the Bureau of Development Services and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ryan as BDS Commissioner to also share his comments.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Rubio. The Bureau of Development Services partners closely with Portland Parks and Recreation's urban forestry to administer Title 11 in private property development situations. The two bureaus work collaboratively along with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to bring amendments to Title 11 last year, which improved tree preservation and planting standards. Portland Parks and Recreation has served as the lead bureau in developing this additional scope of work while working in close coordination with BDS staff. We support the report being presented today, and we look forward to continuing to partner with Portland Parks and Recreation. Before I turn it over, I also want to say how excited I am, and I want to acknowledge Jen herself, Cairo, for being a part of the Permit Improvement Task Force. We have multi-bureaus that are involved, and I appreciate your participation. And I do hope that some of the resources from the levy will be able to provide more resources for parks as we continue to have this coordination of permitting throughout the city. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, I think, Jen Cairo.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan and Commissioners and City Council. Good morning. I'm Jen Cairo. I'm the City Forester and the Urban Forestry Manager. Today, I'll be providing a brief overview of the city's forest and forest management functions, and then report on plans for future tree code amendments. Before proceeding with the overview, I want to recognize and appreciate the work of Nikhilesh Desai and Brian Lando on this and the Title 11 amendment projects recently completed. And Brian Lando, I think, will be presenting a slideshow for you all. Great. We're on slide 2. Thank you. Trees are essential in cities, and an urban forest is a city infrastructure system. Some illustrations of why are listed here. There are many more tree services than these. For example, research by William Sullivan of Illinois University show the lack of green infrastructure is a significant predictor of mortality for low-income communities in urban areas. Here's some information on Portland's forest. About a third of Portland is currently covered by trees, while an average of over 50% could realistically be achieved. There are 220,000 street trees and approximately 90,000 vacant street tree spaces. There are almost 3 times as many trees on private property in Portland as in parks and other city-owned or managed properties. And Portland's urban forest was valued at $5 billion in 2007, and we'll be updating that valuation soon through a partnership with the United States Forest Service. Parks is the city's forest infrastructure manager. As the Bureau of Environmental Services is to the wastewater system, Portland Water Bureau is to potable water, or Portland Bureau of Transportation is to the streets system, Parks Urban Forestry is to trees. More than 3/4 of the urban forestry team have specific technical qualifications in urban forestry and/or arboriculture, and these skills are required for many of the positions. You see here how the group is organized, and it's a broad overview of urban forestry's responsibilities. Starting on the left, the permitting and regulation group in urban forestry includes the city's Tree Customer Service Center, or single point of contact for trees, 503-823-TREE. Urban forestry is also the primary implementer of Portland City Code Title 11 trees, the city's tree code, and permitting and regulation leads that work. In the middle is operations, the city's arborists. Operations performs tree pruning, maintenance, planting, removal, and forest pest and pathogen management on all city-owned and managed properties upon request. Operations also provides the city's 24/7 services for tree emergencies in public roads and city properties. And on the right, science, outreach, and planting is responsible for forest research and analyses such as canopy monitoring, mapping, and inventories. They also conduct community tree stewardship projects. About 14,000 volunteer hours are served each year with the urban forestry team, and that's a bit over 7 full-time equivalents. It's a significant number of folks. Technical specifications and policy development are another area that this group works on. For example, street tree planting specifications and approved street tree species lists for planting. They also lead public communication and education like websites, a bi-monthly newsletter called Tree Bark, and public workshops and programs across the city. And finally, they lead our efforts on tree planting in parks, schools, streets, private yards, and monitoring and reporting on tree planting outcomes. And the city forester, she leads and manages the division, policy, and planning related to tree infrastructure, is where the Tree Code Authority resides, and manages the Urban Forestry Commission, which is the picture on the lower right here. This is an 11-person volunteer committee that advises the city on tree policies and serves as a tree permit appeals board in certain situations. Urban forestry is the lead implementer of Title 11 trees, the tree code, and that was adopted by council in 2011, and implementation began in 2015. The purpose of the tree code is to, quote, enhance the quality of the urban forest and optimize the benefits that trees provide. Portland's tree regulations are organized by property type, where the tree is located. And here we see on the slide the row titles, private property trees, and street and city trees, those which are owned or managed by the city. They're also organized by whether development activity is involved or not, and that's represented here by the column headers, development or non-development. 3 of the 4 quadrants of the code, so to speak, are urban forestry parks responsibility, and 1 is the Bureau of Development Services, specifically private property during development. Urban forestry is also part of implementing the BDS-led regulations, for example, inspecting trees to be preserved during private property development. Title 11, the Tree Code, is an implementation tool of the Urban Forest Management Plan. The Urban Forest Management Plan is the City of Portland's management plan for trees in the city, and it includes not just trees in parks, but trees on private property and streets as well. The plan is an overarching policy and vision for tree infrastructure and establishes a framework of goals, policies, and actions. Parks Urban Forestry is its lead implementer and coordinator, and it involves many public and private stakeholders. And here we see the 3 Urban Forest Management Plan goals. The plan is outdated and needs to be renewed. However, resources haven't been available for the update. The city code calls for updating it every 10 years. The 2004 plan's shortcomings include being light on equity and silent on environmental justice and the climate crisis, challenges in which trees play an essential role. Some current key challenges Parks is working to address. First, trees are dramatically inequitably distributed in Portland. Dark areas of the map are high tree cover and light areas are low tree cover. Although Portland is thought of as a green city, east of the Willamette, where 80% of Portlanders live, tree cover is roughly the same as in Los Angeles. Second, the climate crisis has dramatic impacts on how we manage the forest, and it exacerbates environmental justice challenges. Trees are also part of arresting the climate crisis. Next, in Portland, street tree maintenance is the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. Street trees are city property and an important part of communities. For example, street trees can account for summer temperatures being 15 degrees lower than along streets without trees. This maintenance policy is a known barrier to Portland residents having street trees and perpetuates the inequity we see in services to Portlanders. Finally, tree space along streets is often unnecessarily eliminated due to challenges with interbureau coordination and support for trees. And all of these things disproportionately affect Black folks, Indigenous communities, people of color, and low-income communities. I'll now report on plans for tree code improvements. In 2020, City Council directed certain tree code improvement actions, which have been completed and resulted in amendments to Title 11 recently. Also in 2020, Council directed development of a high-level scope of work for further Title 11 improvements and to identify related funding needs. We're now reporting on that scope of work. Over the past 5 years, the first years of tree code implementation, feedback on Title 11 has been collected and documented. This has been an intentional effort, expecting that a new set of regulations would particularly benefit from review and improvement. Key feedback benchmarks include, in 2016, an oversight advisory committee was convened by the Parks Commissioner and created a report and recommendations for code improvements. Extensive data collection, including surveys and analysis from the first year of code implementation, were compiled and reported also in 2016. Issues and needs have been routinely documented since code implementation began. Growing a More Equitable Forest, a 2-year stakeholder-based project resulting in the city's first tree planting strategy, was completed in 2018. Also, surveys of Portlanders, public input for the recently adopted tree code amendments, and advice from the Urban Forestry Commission and Planning and Sustainability Commission, and the direction and comments of City Council. So that community input from those sources resulted in these goals for the amendments: improve efficiency in implementing tree regulations, resolve inconsistencies within the tree code and with other city codes, provide tools for better implementation of regulations, and to ensure that the tree code aligns with city policies, including an updated current urban forest management plan, citywide tree planting strategy, Growing a More Equitable Forest, and also Portland's Climate Action Plan. The proposed scope of work has 3 sequential parts. Phase 1 addresses technical and minor policy amendments. These don't require data analysis and will make clarifications and simple improvements primarily to non-development regulations. Phase 1 can be achieved with existing resources. Work would start this summer and conclude in 2022. Phase 2 will update the urban forest management plan. It will include significant outreach and engagement with partner bureaus, stakeholders, and the community over about 2 years. Phase 2 requires new resources, including staff. We'll be developing estimates of funding needs over the next year. Phase 3 will develop more substantive amendment proposals. These will involve data analysis and new public and interbureau engagement. Importantly, Phase 3 builds upon and is informed by the updated urban forest management plan that would be completed in Phase 2. We'd like to be able to do all of these things yesterday, so to speak. However, only Phase 1 can be achieved with existing capacity. The other phases rely on new resources yet to be obtained. This scope of work implements the city auditor's recommendation, which was published in the 2017 Tree Code Implementation Audit Report. And that recommendation was that substantive amendment proposals be based upon an updated urban forest management plan. The Urban Forestry Commission supports this approach, and we've integrated expertise from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and Bureau of Development Services into this scope of work. You will find in your packets a joint Portland Parks and Recreation and Bureau of Development Services memo introducing the project. And here are some examples of the types of clarifying amendments that may be considered in Phase 1. Currently, removal of dead heritage trees requires the Urban Forestry Commission's consent, and this has caused unnecessary delays for property owners. Allowing the city forester to approve removal as she can for dangerous heritage trees would improve timeliness. Title 11 references pruning requirements in Title 33, specifically for overlay zones, but not greenway overlay zones. This appears to have been an oversight and could be made consistent in Title 11. Another example is that currently Title 11 allows 15 days for the responsible party to apply to have a code violation notice reviewed or reconsidered. We've seen that this can be too little time in some cases, and we'll look at extending the timeline in certain situations. And finally, the term public nuisance is used in the tree code, but is not defined in the code. We'll look at defining it consistent with the definitions in other City of Portland codes. And again, amendments in this phase 1 project would not require additional resources, but would be with current capacity. So next steps, according to our scope of work, would be phase 1, commencing July 2021. And that would run through winter, including Urban Forestry Commission and Planning and Sustainability Commission public hearings. And then we anticipate returning to City Council with proposed technical and minor amendments early in 2022. Phases 2 and 3, phase 2 being the Urban Forest Management Plan update, and phase 3 more substantive tree code amendments. Those next steps would include hiring staff and continuing to develop the project plan and funding resources. So that concludes our presentation on the scope of work, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Very good. Excellent report. Thank you. That was thorough and well sequenced. It was easy to follow. Thank you very much. Questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Commissioner Hardesty moves. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Rubio seconds. Any further discussion on the report? Please call the roll, Caitlin.
Brian.
Yes, thank you, Jen Cairo. That was a great, I enjoyed our conversation yesterday as well. We had dialogue about the challenges of Portland's short blocks, if you will, and all the needs that take place outside of a building, the competing needs with PBOT and all the other bureaus and trees. And then you educated me, it was you, Nick, on oak trees are the really good trees to grow that take less water and yet still give you tree canopy. And so I think the one thing I just want to put out is keep looking into, with more and more residential responsibility with upkeep, that's an expense that I know some fixed income seniors in my neighborhood that are trying to live in place are challenged with. And so I want to know how we'll be able to help with that. So all of that said, I just really appreciate the dialogue that led up to this. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio and Commissioner Ryan, for this presentation. Thank you very much, Jen Cairo, for your very thoughtful presentation. I agree. I think this is excellent work. I think it's a great framework. And I share Commissioner Ryan's concern about the ultimate impact, especially in areas that have very limited tree canopy right now. And if we're about equity, how do we make sure that other areas, especially East Portland, which is my home, has access to the beautiful canopy that makes up a lot of Southwest Portland? But I know that we have to have standards in place. This is a good upgrade, but I hope that we'll continue to monitor the impact as we continue to plant trees in areas that are tree deficit due to no fault of the community itself. I think we're going to have to figure out how to do better, but this is what we have today. I'm happy to vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you for this report. I look forward to seeing this important work move forward. I vote aye.
Rubio.
Thank you to Jen Cairo, and also thank you to Brian and Nick for their thoughtfulness and inclusion of feedback from different sources to create this scope of work that will result in long overdue updates to the management plan. I also want to thank BDS and BPS for their partnership in developing this report and administering Title 11. I also hear my colleagues' concerns and about just making sure we monitor how this goes along. And so we hear that, and we'll continue to monitor as we go forward. As we face our climate crisis, our tree canopy is a key strategy for us. And we need to responsibly steward our green infrastructure and value it in the same way that we do other kinds of infrastructure like streets and sewer systems. And although some might view Portland as that they might think just upon first look that Portland is very plentiful with trees, there are many parts of our city with less tree canopy than Los Angeles. And these areas also tend to be disproportionately in places where Black, Indigenous people of color, and low-income community members live. So addressing this inequity is something that we need to be responsive to with dedicated efforts and clear intention, and to grow our canopy capacity as equitably and sustainably as possible. So thanks again for the report. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Great report. Thank you. I vote aye. The report is accepted. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to finish item number 378. Then we'll go to the 4/5 item. Could you please read 378, please?
Authorize the Director of the Office of Violence Prevention to execute special appropriation grant agreements.
Colleagues, this is a matter that I pulled from the consent agenda. I'd like to propose an amendment to clarify that the Office of Violence Prevention Director is authorized to execute grant agreements and grant amendments through June 30th of 2022, when the council expressly allocates special appropriation grant funds to the Office of Violence Prevention in the city's budget by ordinance. Community Safety Director Mike Myers is here to answer any questions that my colleagues may have. It's my understanding that I will need to make that motion as well as get a second on it, but why don't we hear from Director Myers first?
I was about to second your motion, Mayor, but before Mike talks, maybe.
All right, well, in that case, I move the amendment. Commissioner Hardesty seconds it. It's now on the table. Director Myers. Thanks, Commissioner Hardesty. I appreciate that.
Mayor, thank you for having me today. For the record, my name is Mike Myers. I'm the Community Safety Transition Director for the City of Portland. Mayor, I think your amendment spells out the issue at hand. We had an original ordinance back on April 7th of this year. It was titled a Gun Violence Reduction Ordinance. And within that ordinance, many things were stated. One of them allowing the Office of Violence Prevention Director to be a signature authority up to $500,000 for certain grants related to grantees doing work out in the streets, outreach and such. There was some clarifying language that was needed. We put it into a council agenda item that allowed for special appropriations for signatory authority for that director. But I think the amendment today puts a time limitation on that, which I think will make people more comfortable and allowing a director to have that signatory authority that's rather unusual. So thank you for the amendment today.
Yeah, thanks, Director Myers. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Myers. I appreciate the Mayor's amendment, but Director Myers, I also am concerned that there appears to be 2 applicants that did not go through a formal process that seem to have been added just before the City Council was taking their vote on the ordinance. And you and I spoke about that, and I spoke about it on council when we first passed the ordinance. I want to make sure that the money that goes out the door, because of the action we take today, are the programs that we have a history of working with around gun violence reduction, and then the 2 newer ones that just kind of popped up out of nowhere. I would appreciate you not putting grants together for that until we can have a deeper conversation about where they came from. What was the application process? It just didn't look like it was transparent to me and my colleagues. And so I know that there are some that, we desperately need to get out of the door. The other ones were not part of the original process. So I would recommend that you report back to us about what you find about those 2 late additions and what your recommendation is for us moving forward on allocating those resources out.
I can do that, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Mapps.
I support the proposals before us today. So in the end, I'm going to vote aye. At the same time, I think it raises a larger issue that I hope council can come to terms with, which is the spending authority that we grant our bureau directors. I believe that this initiative gives the director over at OVP really some remarkable powers to move dollars out the door. There are urgent needs for that, so I'm glad to make this move towards expediency. At the same time, I think it points to a broader set of issues which kind of apply to each and every one of our bureaus. And I'd like to see us, as a council, come together and develop a citywide fix. So I hope that as we move forward, we can find space to have that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Rubio.
I also just want to, echo the, that we all have, we're all watching this to make sure that it's expedited and processed in the way that we intended as council and through the community intent that was lifted up. But I also want to say that, I've talked with Director Myers and directly, I also have, our staffs are very involved in this discussion. And also the community is very involved in this discussion. And I'm very confident, with our staff and with Director Myers, with the Office of OVP, that all approvals will be vetted with community partners in the task force, as well as at our offices in our weekly check-ins with the office. So with that, we looked at this, so I'm pretty confident. I just want my colleagues to know that as well. So I appreciate Director Myers being here, and yeah, we'll continue to be on top of it, and we'll have more discussions with our team.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say ditto. Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. I'm following you, so I really appreciate the words that were just said. I'm really happy to know, Director Myers, that you're connected to this work, and that we really get strategic about what success looks like, and that this is really compelling and difficult work, and having your lived experience and leadership, collaborative leadership involved really this is a great amendment. So anyway, happy that we're having this conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Ryan. Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Mapps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment is adopted. The main motion is amended. An emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Great conversation. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I want to really thank Commissioner Mapps, Rubio, and Ryan for actually working out this process in the beginning and really thinking very thoughtfully about how we could invest money in gun violence reduction. I think that the programs that have been enhanced by City Council activity will play a huge role in helping our community address this rise in gun violence. And I am grateful that Mike Myers is at the helm of actually looking at this strategically and through an organizational community safety lens. It's one of the pieces, it's not the only piece, but it's a vital piece if our community is going to partner with us in reducing the incidence of gun violence in our community. I vote aye.
Mapps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. To the 4/5 agenda 396-1, please.
Proclaim June 1, 2021 to be Black Wall Street Day.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mayor, for co-sponsoring the ordinance in front of us today. And the ordinance is, in fact, an acknowledgement of one of the worst race riots in the history of the United States of America. And I am referring to the Tulsa, Oklahoma riot that we are acknowledging today. I am going to turn this. Let me just say, we're bringing this up because Tulsa, Oklahoma was considered at the time the Black Wall Street. It was a place where Black community members were thriving. And it was actually around 1901 where that community was established. And if you know the history, what you know is that there was some anger that there were 11,000 Black residents that were thriving and economically prosperous, and other white residents in Tulsa who weren't having the same kind of economic success decided that they would actually destroy this town. We have invited today to provide public testimony Marcus Monday, who, as you know, is the president of the Coalition of Communities of Color, and Mims Rouse, who I'm not quite sure who he's representing today. Are you representing the African American, the Black Chamber of Commerce, or who are you representing, Mims?
Oh, yeah. So I am the executive director for the Coalition of Black Men and the founder of Afrotech.
Well, thank you both for being here today. And Mayor, if it's okay with you, I'll just turn it over to Marcus Monday and Mims for their presentation, and then come back and read the resolution.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Mayor. My name is Marcus Monday. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition of Communities of Color. We're a 19-member multicultural coalition of nonprofits focused on improving the lives and livelihoods of families in our region, including our focus on the very same economic factors and entrepreneurship embodied by the Black residents of Tulsa in the proclamation that you're sharing today and that Commissioner Hardesty just mentioned. And it's also crystallized by other facets of our work, such as our role in the Portland Clean Energy Fund's development, passage, and implementation. That has great economic implications, and our research on the racial wealth gap and other efforts. In short, we believe in prosperity and opportunity for all Portland residents. I appreciate the City Council for officially issuing this proclamation and recognizing this devastating event, and Commissioner Hardesty and Mayor Wheeler for inviting me here to speak today. I'm here to reinforce the messages that I received when I read the proclamation and gently push back on one notion. The reinforcement is that a community united can create a thriving economy and an enviable set of living conditions for itself, despite egregious inequity, because the power of hard work and determination, coupled with necessity and opportunity, can never be understated. That legislation and you commissioners have incredible power and the responsibility to make choices benefiting all Portlanders, not just homeowners or lobbyists or big business owners. Oklahoma chose segregation as its first official act after becoming a state, setting in motion the predicate for the misery that followed. Oregon entirely excluded Blacks and many other people of color, and history shows that the early choices you make will have lasting impacts. And I think this proclamation is a reminder of that. In the proclamation, the power of accusation, whether founded or unfounded, has a cancerous effect on the body politic and on individuals, and that we must be ever skeptical and vigilant that such accusations are not supported by official channels. The massacre of which you spoke started with an accusation, Commissioner Hardesty, and that there is nothing less than the lives of Portlanders at stake when you make your decisions, which brings me to one of my final comments, and that is, the proclamation notes that certain events set the stage for the largest race riot and race massacre in our nation's history. And this is where I diverge from the proclamation, and a reason why I wanted to join you today, because I wanted noted on the record that I disagree that the largest race massacre occurred 100 years ago. I submit our largest race massacre occurred with the thousands upon thousands that died in the Middle Passage, or later during more than a century of slavery, or even today in America and Portland, where Blacks are dying. This is our largest current race massacre, and it may be less visible, but it continues relentlessly. Recognizing Black Wall Street requires that we mourn and that we fully resolve to end hate-based violence immediately and dismantle systemic racism. But it also presents us with a vision. It represents many other communities that our government sought to end through policies of disinvestment and those that resulted in displacement. But Black Wall Street shows us what is possible when communities come together and draw upon their strength, cultural assets, and relationships. Through economic justice, community development, addressing social determinants of health, and more, can create the conditions where Black and other communities of color can build flourishing neighborhoods that all Portlanders can celebrate. That said, it's my most fervent hope that this council continues to not just acknowledge, but address the issues of inequity plaguing the city. Many in the US believe we are going through a racial reckoning, but my belief is that we are going through a glacial reckoning. It is too slow. Overdue change is not happening at a pace that reflects the needs of Americans or Portlanders. Recognizing Black Wall Street and this massacre that occurred in Tulsa means we must resolve to learn from this history, internalize its lessons, and take action. Lastly, I'm proud that Portland has elected people of color, including 3 of you commissioners sitting before me today. But representation alone is not enough. We all must explicitly adopt and live the values of equity in policies passed and across all of our bureaus. I thank you today for this proclamation, the recognition of the work ahead, and the opportunity to address all of you today. So thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing from my good friend, Mims Rouse.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Mims Rouse, and I am the Executive Director for the Coalition of Black Men, an organization that has served the Black community in Portland for over 30 years. I am also the founder of an African-American tech firm. Learning that Portland is proclaiming June 1st Black Wall Street Day does my heart good. Growing up, I only heard bits and pieces about Black Wall Street, knowing what I knew of chattel slavery and segregation and the indomitable spirit of African Americans. I knew that it had to exist in some form. It just made sense to me. I was born in the South, so I know what it's like to cross a certain street in town and immediately feel safe, to feel free and capable. I also know the tension that exists when whites feel that you are in the wrong place, that you're encroaching. From birth, my parents introduced me to the constant, precarious race dance that plays out across America and the missteps that occur when the music stops. As I grew older, I saw a photo here and there of Black Wall Street, but nothing really captured its essence. This changed one day. It happened shortly after we elected our first Black president. Though we were all proud in our African-American communities, there were grumblings that this well-educated, tall, handsome, affable prince of a Black man was not the first person suited to be president. In short time, Facebook became a scrapbook for Black success. Family, friends, and colleagues posted photo after photo of presidential Black folk from back in the day. Then inevitably, someone posted short, grainy film clips from Black Wall Street. I saw elite Black women dressed in furs with brilliant white gloves pulled up to their elbows, Black men wearing business suits, posing outside Black-owned banks, professional offices, and grocery stores. I saw what I assumed was multi-generational wealth. I then fully understood the adage, American streets are paved with gold. Reconciling the film clip with what I knew of America, I surmised that the situation was actually a powder keg. Though I know their fate, I grew anxious for their safety each time I view it. I arrived in Portland over 8 years ago for a job with a Fortune 500 company. My elderly cousin, who's lived here for over 40 years, warned me. Little cousin, he said, here they wear their sheets on the inside. As we mark this coming day, I hope for future preventative actions as well. For Black Wall Street continues to be bombed with illegal employment practices, predatory lending, white gentrification, over-policing, benign neglect, etc. I hope to see more preventative actions taken, like reparations for African Americans, investments in our small businesses and schools, and accountability in policing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, would you like to see if our colleagues have comments before I read the resolution?
You bet. Commissioner Mapps, then Commissioner Rubio.
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, Commissioner Hardesty, thank you for bringing this proclamation forward. I would also like to express my appreciation for the comments offered by Mr. Mundy and Mr. Rouse. And I'm grateful that this council is taking a moment to recognize Black Wall Street Day. This afternoon, we pause to remember what has to be one of the darkest moments in race relations here in the United States. Of course, as we've heard, this proclamation refers to anti-Black riots, which occurred in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. Back then, between May 31st and June 1st, 1921, more than 35 square blocks of Tulsa's Black Wall Street neighborhood were burnt to the ground. Estimates of the number of people killed range from 75 up to 300. Of course, most of those victims were Black. This episode is amongst the most deadly moments of racial violence in American history. For historical comparables, we'd have to look at some of the most brutal massacres of Native Americans. Now, if you're like me, Black Wall Street Day leaves you with some questions. This moment speaks to us, but what does it teach us? I'm struggling with that still. And that's why I appreciate this opportunity to think about the moral meaning of Black Wall Street Day with you. Now, as we enter Black Wall Street Day, I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I do invite you to join me in thinking about these three questions. First, how do present day race relations in Portland compare to race relations in Tulsa in the 1900s? You know, lots of things have changed, but I suspect some things have stayed the same too. So that's something I'm thinking about as I ponder Black Wall Street Day. The second question I'm thinking about is, could, or maybe even do, Tulsa-like spasms of racial violence happen here in Portland? And third, the question that I'm thinking about right now is, what can Portlanders do to make sure that Tulsa never happens again? Of course, there are many other questions that this episode should cause us to think about, and I hope that we do. And I look forward to hearing your views about how Portland can evolve into a safer and more equitable city. And I thank everyone who will be joining me on June 1st to commemorate Black Wall Street Day. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Rubio, then Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you to my colleagues for bringing this forward. And thank you, Mims and Marcus, for your very important comments. As we remember this anniversary of what happened in Tulsa, we must also hold space to reflect on how Black life, wealth, and community have been endangered and undermined in our own community here in Portland. And with the legacy of what that means for us as policymakers today, and also our responsibility to do better. A few weeks back, my staff and I received a briefing from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability about the racist history of planning in the city of Portland. And they went back over a century looking at how white city leaders made planning decisions that kept them apart and robbed their ability to create or even keep multi-generational wealth in their communities and in their families. And what many cities across the country did over our history and the terrorizing and massacre of the Black community by the violent mob in Tulsa in just one night reminds us that the vast contributions, the innovation, and the entrepreneurship that's present in our Black communities cannot thrive if there is not the presence of accountability, if there's not the presence of justice, and if the pervasive fear of Black social and economic success, of Black communities thriving, continues to quietly live in our institutions, in our policies, and our behaviors. So it shouldn't be lost on us that this acknowledgement today also intersects with our recognition of Memorial Day, where people literally lost their lives to uphold all our rights to this justice and community self-determination. And this recognition is important personally to me because as a member of the Latinx community, our communities are rooted in different experiences, but the same struggle and similar struggles for justice. So I appreciate you bringing this forward, Commissioner and Mayor. It's a reminder that we not forget this terrible history, but we also continue rejecting that we repeat this physical and economic violence that's occurred, and that we are accountable to that history, and that we remember and we uphold the dignity of all lives, and particularly Black lives, and that they matter here in Portland.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, for bringing this forward, and for my colleagues on tying it into what's relevant in terms of our own backyard. I really want to thank Marcus and Memes for their comments. They were so relevant and so helpful to get me in the right place as I was listening to this. Marcus, you mentioned, early choices have a lasting impact. And I'll just tell a little bit of a story that I have connected to this. And that was my former position. I was asked to work with the new ED in Tulsa, doing work on their Cradle to Career Initiative work. And she was very hesitant to talk about this. She just said there was some very difficult things in the past that makes talking about racial equity very difficult. And I pushed a little bit more to ask what she was talking about. And she really didn't articulate it very well. Then 5 years later, a new person was hired, and we were on this National Equity Committee together, and she told the truth. And it ended up taking over the entire session, which was wonderful. And this was like 6 years ago in a national conversation with about 100 people from across the country. I say this because I was taken by your comments, Mims, where you said that you would hear bits and pieces, and then you saw the Facebook, and I had an experience that was similar to that. And then finally, the HBO series Watchmen showed up, and then people suddenly all wanted to act like they've known about this forever. That's not true. Most people just started finding out about it. And so I think I'm just always blown away how these gripping, poignant, harsh realities of the past take so long to be unearthed. And so that was never lost on me. And I think every marginalized community has some stories like that. Anyway, I just want to say I really appreciate both of you being here and giving us some great testimony this morning. And I appreciate that we're taking a breath and we're making it relevant to Portland as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. And before you read the proclamation, Commissioner Hardesty, I just want to say briefly how much I appreciate this being put front and center. And I want to thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I want to thank our speakers, Marcus and Mims. This is an extremely difficult period in US history. And there's really two ways in my mind as I look at what's going on, as I serve as a white man, as the mayor of a city in the midst of both a national and a local reckoning around race. And I have a lot of thoughts, none of which I can necessarily put in a coherent form today, but at some point I will. I have lots of thoughts about leadership. I have lots of thoughts about my own role going forward in that leadership around what it really takes to make the kinds of sacrifices that are ultimately necessary for us to not only just make this a moment, but make this an important and transformational moment for our nation and for our community. And I'm often struck by the metaphor that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King used. He kept talking about the beloved community. And I love to have conversations about the beloved community. What did he mean by that? And is it possible? And what does it take to get there? And there's sort of a first assumption in that metaphor that you need love. Something that I would argue is in very short supply right now. You cannot have love without communication. And by that, I mean, not just communicating with people who are exactly like we are, but in fact, communicating with people who are fundamentally different or have different histories, lived experiences, circumstances. And we don't do that enough in our society. And you can't have authentic communication without understanding. Understanding is the essential element. And so I often think about what is our role as city commissioners. We're not the top of the food chain by any stretch of the imagination, but because we're close to the bottom of the political food chain, people rely on us even more. We're not ethereal. We're not, arm's distance away somewhere else. We're here. We're in the grocery store. We're in our kids' schools. We're on the street corners. And so I often think, what does it take for us to get to understanding? And it's moments like this that we come to understand it. It is through a clear-eyed and frank and objective understanding of the history of this nation and the history of this state and the history of this community. And we all have a role in developing that understanding and creating that communication. And I want to be clear, I didn't say we all have to agree. I said we had to have understanding and an appreciation for wherever other people are coming from, and having that authentic and open communication, which then leads to a sense of love. We can still love people we disagree with, and that ultimately gets to where Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King hoped ultimately society could find itself in the midst of a beloved community. Here's the part of the frank conversation I wanted to get to. This is an important historical acknowledgement that we are making here today. I do not want to open a can of worms. I do not want to detract from the importance of this issue. I will simply relate a fact to you. And the fact is this: not a week ago, I was standing in a church, a Black church in Portland, Oregon, in Northeast Portland, right in front of a podium that Dr. Martin Luther King preached from, in the midst of a group of Black leaders who are seeking a non-violent solution to gun violence in our community. Whether you agree with their strategy or disagree, that was their intent. And while we were having that meeting, that press conference, to make the call to the community for people to come and support the notion of non-violent means of resolving conflict, a group of white people were trying to break down the door of the church and gain entrance right here in Portland, Oregon, a week ago. That tells me how far we have yet to go to really have understanding. I try to have grace. I try to have compassion for all. I don't know what drives their anger or their frustration. I just know it was deeply misguided. And it contributes to the perpetuation of a culture that continues to create trauma and harm to our Black community. And as a white person, I am speaking to those white individuals and telling them they need to come to the center in a better way, seeking understanding. That's what we need in this community and in the state and in the nation. And I'm prepared to do my part, colleagues. Commissioner Hardesty, I really appreciate you bringing this forward. I understand it was brought forward by my office, but this was something that was particularly important to you, and I want to acknowledge that and appreciate it, because it's an important learning moment for all of us, even those who know the story well. I think it's always important, as we do with Memorial Day, to take the time to take stock, to reflect, to help spread an understanding, or at least start an important dialogue. That's a good first step. With that, Commissioner Hardesty, I'll turn it back to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much, Marcus and Mims, for being here on such short notice and providing such compelling testimony. Before I read the proclamation, I just want to center us at where are we today in Oregon? Can we say honestly in Oregon that we are an inclusive, equitable city that cares for all of our people the same? Wouldn't take me a long time to say nope, not even close. And I could use our own data to prove that is so. For 50 years of record keeping, we know that all the social determinants of health, Native Americans continue to be at the very bottom across the line, whether we're talking home ownership, business attainment, education attainment, et cetera, across the board. African Americans continue to be right on top of them, and my Latino brothers and sisters are right on top of them. And so if we were a state that actually were who we thought we were, who we say we are, somebody 30 some years ago would have went, wait, that can't be. How do we fix this? Right? Regardless of where you look at our criminal justice system. Every step of our criminal justice system has racism built into the very fiber of it. We, again, can't say that it doesn't exist, because all the data shows that from its inception, it has continued to overrepresent Black and other people of color, right? So as we think about Black Wall Street, we can't forget that we had our own Black Wall Street right on Front Street downtown in Portland. And it went the way of most other Black Wall Streets. It disappeared when white people decided they wanted to be downtown. And gentrification happened and they were pushed out. And we've seen that experience over and over again every 20 years or so, whether we need to or not. The question is, as we come out of what has been the most challenging year in the history of the United States of America, after we are through with all the crises that have confronted us, what are we building coming out of this madness? Who will we be as we move from 2021 until 2022 and 2023? Are we going to be who we say we are on paper? And are we going to be able to prove it? I can tell you, just a couple of weeks ago, we got a report that says African Americans, there's no zip code in the city of Portland that African Americans would not be housing burdened by living in the city of Portland. Think about that. Here we are in 2021, and Black people cannot live within the city boundaries without being price burdened. We know Native Americans only have a couple of zip codes that is comfortable for them to be able to live in without being burdened. And I know the same is also true for Latinx. We have to talk about how we count Latinx, because sometimes we hide the numbers because we count them in the white numbers so they don't show up. I am so pleased that the mayor supported bringing this resolution back, because as we start rebuilding, as we continue to say we're centering BIPOC voices, this is what we have to center. We have to center economic prosperity and generational wealth to ensure that the African American experience in Portland moving forward isn't tied to political will or political whim, but actually is tied to an economic structure that supports the viability. Earlier today, we had a procurement proposal I continue to be frustrated that we have 14 programs that are supposed to benefit minority and women-owned firms in the city of Portland, and not one of them actually achieves the goals that we've set out. So we know what we need to do. The question is, do we have the political will and the community will to make it happen? Thank you all today. I think this, we've had a couple of really necessary conversations today. I think this is one of those that we have to continue to have. And I know how uncomfortable it is in the Pacific Northwest to even talk about race, much less racial accountability. But if we don't, we will never, we'll be here 20 years from now, looking at the same demographic data and wondering where we failed. Thank you all. I'm going to read the resolution now. And thank you, colleagues. Whereas, established in 1901, the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was later a flourishing community called Black Wall Street. And whereas, despite segregation and Jim Crow laws, Black Wall Street had a thriving middle class built on the success of Black businesses. Whereas, since modern day history, African Americans have always been an integral part to success in Oklahoma, having worked as cowboys, cattle punchers, farmers, railroad builders, and helped to build cities. Whereas, once Oklahoma became a state, the first bill passed segregated the state, forcing most African Americans to move to Tulsa. But, whereas, when oil was discovered in Tulsa, it began to thrive in population and wealth, trickling down to the African American population. Tulsa was deemed the magic city, leading the nation in oil. And whereas in 1905, Black entrepreneurs created a business district in Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma, opening its first business, a grocery store. And whereas Greenwood grew in size and prosperity, becoming home to 11,000 Black residents and contained 108 Black businesses and 36 square blocks. Greenwood was the home to a thriving Black commercial district whose many red brick buildings belonged to African Americans and housed thriving businesses including grocery stores, banks, libraries, and much more. And one of the most affluent African American communities in the country, Greenwood became known as Black Wall Street. And whereas the Tulsa Tribune, which published an accusation of an assault by Dick Rowland, a Black teenager, on a white woman, inflamed tensions and endangered the life of Rowland by threat of lynching. And whereas the events of the accusation, the concern of the lynching, and the support of Rowland by Black residents led to Tulsa deputizing white residents and arresting a large portion of the African American population, leaving them defenseless to what became later known as the largest race riot and race massacre in the nation. Whereas most of this has been omitted from history, because of course the victors write the history books, it is stated that between 75 and 300 were murdered, 6,000 Black Tulsans were imprisoned, 1,256 houses were burned, 215 others were looted, and more than 8,000 people were made homeless. 2 newspapers, a school, a library, a church, churches, hotels, stores, and many other Black-owned businesses were among the buildings destroyed or damaged by fire over those 18 hours in 1921. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim June 1st, 2021 to be Black Wall Street Day in Portland, and observances of the worst race massacre in the history of the United States, and encourage all residents to observe this day. That concludes the presentation, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, NIMS and Marcus, for your presentations today. Very important note to end our morning session on. Yes. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
has got a little bit more attention in the UK. This idea of old age rational suicide. The idea is that people who have reached a certain age, who are dealing with these constellations of symptoms, should have the right to assisted dying, just like someone who has, say, a terminal cancer.
I think that's the first time that you've used the word suicide in our conversation so far in the last 20 minutes. And it gets to, just one of the many thorny issues here of language. Assisted suicide used to be, decades ago, one of the phrases that people who were fighting for the kinds of laws that we're talking about, that was common language then. That's no longer.